This is,
You skip a couple of weeks and
this is what
We
happens.
don't know what we're doing. We're all
Get
falling
awful
apart.
sloppy.
Give
All
it
right.
1 second while everyone comes in. All right, you're good.
We're good?
Yeah.
All right, well, welcome everyone to the May 6th Select Board meeting at the Clark Room of Town Hall. I see Mr. Modell is walking in, so
I thought there'd be like a line out the door.
I know.
public comment, right?
Public comment, that's the
yeah.
hottest ticket in town, right?
Yeah, well,
Oh,
so-
look, there, a bunch of people have
oh yeah, they're
And,
online, ready.
The
ready.
usual suspects.
allowed
So
in.
tonight's a little different. We're going to be talking about the annual town meeting. We're going to have public comment throughout the articles that we're going to be talking about. We're going to start with the police station renovation, then fire station renovation, MBTA community citizen petition, accessory dwelling unit bylaw, town administrator bylaw, and then the budget and capital items. And the way I'm going to kind of structure that is we do have some invited guests tonight to discuss the, I believe, police and fire, but maybe it's just fire. And so we'll have those, and then, but we will open it up during that time for public comment. But that said, if there's anyone who has a public comment on something that we don't plan to talk about this evening, I just kind of went over those bulleted points. You're welcome to make that comment now or ask a question. Anyone online? All right, anyone in the room? Most people here are for specific things. All right, so we do have a quorum. All 5 members are present. And we will start with unless the town administrator has any other new business that we should be aware of.
Ready to go.
Ready to go. All right. We'll start with the police station renovation project.
Actually, I'm sorry, can I make a quick public comment?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. First of all, I just wanted to say publicly, since this is the first meeting we've had since the 250th celebration, that I think the town of Carlisle did an amazing job, all of the staff that pitched in, and Scott Evans and his committee, and the experience we all had as 5 members of the select board being involved in the Concord celebration and the parade was, I think, really meaningful for all of us. The other thing, which is a very sad bit of news, but I'm sure you're all aware of this, but I just wanted to say publicly that I know all of the select board members joined me in just sending our very condolences and support for all of the families and friends and teachers and students that have been affected by the tragedy of the 4 students that were in a horrible car accident, the 3 of whom have died. And I know that I just want to acknowledge that here publicly as the select board really wanting to show our support for both communities as well as the specific family here in town that has lost their child. So, thank you.
Very well said. And thank you, Barney. Okay, so why don't we move into the first item on this agenda, which is the police station renovation project. I think we have to discuss the warrant article on that, and the specific question we have is the amount that we want to ultimately put on that. So maybe, Mr. Town Administrator, you can kind of get us up to speed or invite who you think should.
I do. Yep.
Great. Hello, Neil.
Good evening. How are you tonight?
Good. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and.
Sure. Neil Joyce, Construction Monitoring Services. We're the OPM for the police station renovation project.
Okay, so we're down to the number that it needs to go into the motion, and then will eventually be what is carried during the election. So, as you know, town meeting sets the budget, and the election would allow for the debt exclusion override, which would fund the project. So, walking through what we know is the construction bid. The general bid came in at $3,383,401. Alternate 1 was generally agreed upon as something that we wanted to accept, and that did not change the bidding or who was selected for the bidding, and that alternate is $11,360. The project has always carried a $75,000 furnishing allowance, And we have two updated numbers for the architect and the OPM fees, which are $102,000 and $218,000 respective. That $102,000 number has changed from the last time you saw this. So the total is $3,789,761. If you were to take what was last discussed, which is a 12% contingency for that total, that would be $454,771. That's on everything that was just discussed, for a total of $4,244,532. If you remember the last time we talked about it, we approximated 4.3. So this is under that. The only other thing that has been discussed since the last meeting, the Police Station Building Renovation Committee met. They decided, because the specs on the project that were bid had resistant heat and not heat pumps for both of the garage and the sally port, that they were not going to support that. So they're recommending not to accept alternates 2 and 3. So this would be representation of what the Police Station Building Renovation Committee is recommending for you. For a
Can you
total
refresh
cost.
our memory, what's alternate one?
Alternate 1 is the finishings on the first floor to include
Oh, right, to
flooring,
bring-
painting,
Yep, yep,
etc.
got it.
And on the point with the heating, can you just clarify, there will be no heating, or will there be a future request for a heat pump system?
There will be no heating. If there was going to be heating, it would be a future request.
Okay, so their recommendation is to go the no heating route as opposed to doing this alternate, this.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because the alternate didn't meet what is currently the way we install heating. So they said, for much less, you could put a space heater in there and test the heating that way. If you're going to do the full heating system, that should be in the future.
How far in the future?
It can't be included in this bid
Right,
regardless,
okay.
so it wouldn't matter. It wasn't spec'd that way.
Another quick question, if I might. So the 102 architect fee is what we saw in our packet here, that describe, which is on, for those that want to see it, page 4 of the packet, if you just go in order. And it shows, I don't know if you can put that graph up, Ryan, but it shows that 4 of the 10, I guess you'd say, items that were in, I believe, in the original scope, if I read this correctly, Neil, have been completed according to this chart, and that the contract administration and the warranty represents the $102,000 that's in the architect
I
fees?
believe it's for their construction administration services. And
When
then
they
the
say contract administration, you think that's construction?
Construction administration,
Which
yes.
is in our packet, and then this warranty piece of $1,200 is 9 months after substantial completion. They basically come back and do a
Yes.
last
Yep.
walkthrough, okay. But that's the architect fee, so where's the OPM fee? And how has that changed or not changed?
Our OPM fee has not changed.
Okay, so the other graph, you just, well, maybe you want to let people catch up to this part, yeah.
So the OPM fee is the original contract
Okay,
for the whole police station renovation
Right.
project, including Neil's appearance right here now.
right, so that's not changing.
Unchanged.
Okay. Okay, so the total amount being asked for at town meeting, though, is more than the 102,000. So I'm just trying to, right, didn't you just say it's, what did you say we're asking for at town meeting?
4244,
Well,
530.
we're only asking for the incremental extra, right?
It's 4244 minus the 30.
Yeah, you should show that.
3,000,005, that top line
Right.
above the, where it says
You
item.
should do that math, Ryan, on the spreadsheet right now.
Right, where we can see what is it we're asking of this town meeting? How much more are we
is it
asking
than
from
the
them?
Original from last year.
I erased it all to simplify it. I think that's funny.
Well,
Just, oh,
but this
yeah.
doesn't
Here we go.
tell
It's
us.
back to where it was before.
But last year we approved how much, just,
Okay, so
We don't even need all that. We just
We
need that,
approved
that
3550.
3550 minus,
188.
yeah.
there we go.
and so we're looking for another 700,000 roughly.
A little under
A
700.
little under 700,000. But it's being presented, and in the election, the amount will will be, for the debt exclusion, will be the incremental amount that's being approved or the whole amount? Remind me on that one.
So town meeting sets this number,
Right. The
The-
4.2 or the 700, the incremental?
the 4.2. So you're
Okay.
going to amend last year's vote to the new number. The election just allows you to
Right.
tax that. So the number won't be in the election ballot. It'll just be a town meeting.
The number won't be in the election. So
What do
what
you
are they
mean?
gonna see in the ballot?
That you're asking them to override Prop 2.5 for the debt for the police station building.
And it won't say how much?
It never does.
Okay, so backing up again to that first, or it's probably on here somewhere.
It's
Where is the
3550.
contingency? So you've taken, what percentage is that?
12.
12% you settled on, okay. Because remember, we had a lot of back and forth on this.
And I
The
think
last
12
time.
is where we landed, but I could be
Yes,
wrong.
that's what I recall.
Is
We've
that-
got our
Yeah,
OPM
because
here.
we
You
didn't-
want to
yeah.
just ask him?
Well, yeah, because I don't know if you listened to the recording, but, 2 meetings ago, there was quite a bit of back and forth and not a sort of clear agreement about what that contingency what was being recommended for that contingency.
Right, so any renovation project, we would recommend a minimum of 10%. Whereas you have not done a tremendous amount of investigation in an occupied building, we recommended that it should be increased. And I think the recommendation that was provided from the team last time was somewhere between 12 and 15%, and I think you folks landed at 12. So that's good, I'm good with that, as long as you're comfortable with it.
Okay.
And we'll
And
go
so
from there.
that's 12% of the new cost that we're going to
The
be.
total.
Of the total new
Right.
cost. Okay.
But, Neil, so we're at the low side of the contingency. Contingency's there because there might be things that happen, so is that advisable to be at the low side?
It-
Honestly, now that we've crossed the $4 million barrier, are anybody gonna care? If we went to 15 or, like, what happens if you run out of contingency?
So not shown on this, to try and simplify it, because I perhaps modeled it last time, is the PEG fund and the rebate
So
funds.
that's another contingency.
So that's a little bit of contingency there, and then you would have, without another town meeting vote, you would have the annual FinCom reserve, which you can't bank on, right, but a percentage of that could be used, so I would say you have another 100,000 backup here.
Okay.
That we could draw on from other sources if we had to.
And isn't something like OPM's contract fixed, so the 218 is locked in on this, or not? It's pretty much.
So I believe that our contract is for a set period of time, to the extent that we're finished within 12 months, which I believe is what the contract says, our fee is fixed. If we go 14 months for some unforeseen reason, we would look for an appropriate adjustment in compensation based on the level of effort that's expended.
And is that based on the hourly fees that you quoted for under the fire station part of this packet?
No, this is a completely separate
Separate
contract.
hourly fee?
Yes.
No, I know it is, but I didn't know if your hourly fees would still apply if you all had to put in more time
Honestly,
on it.
I think they're the same, Barney. I don't
Uh-huh.
think they changed because we
Uh-huh.
provided proposals in the same time frame.
Okay,
I don't remember right off the top of my head, but they should be very close,
okay,
if not the same.
So the architect fees are based on if something's found where there needs to be more design work, or if some of the permitting and regulatory stuff requires a significant amount of meetings, then that could also increase.
mhm.
Could it decrease?
It's not going to decrease.
All right, all right.
And so, sorry, just to come back, so the additional amount that we are asking town meeting to approve, and I know we're doing it in a way that they're sort of approving a new total cost, but what is the additional amount from what it was originally?
$694,344.
Is the,
Additional from the 355 that we approved at town meeting to. $694,344.
but that's not all coming from, we're not asking for all of that to be approved because aren't we applying
No,
something?
that
No,
is-
we
that
are
is what
asking
we're
for
asking.
that to be approved.
We
What
are.
I'm saying, Barney,
Okay.
is that in and of itself may not be sufficient.
No, I get it,
So
but we
there's
have
some
the
more money that we're
contingent.
not talking about.
Right,
that we
so
could deploy.
I'm just trying to remind us all that in previous conversations, we were applying some funds from other sources already to lower, and you're saying now we're not gonna apply, for instance, the media, blanking on the
funds.
name of our PEG funds, for instance. Are we not doing that anymore in terms of trying to lower this cost?
No, we will.
So that's embedded in this.
I just tried to simplify the contingency calculation because it was being based on different markers. So this
Yeah.
is the most consistent. If you wanted to have less contingency because you have PEG funds, and then we can do that. But the first things we will use are non-tax dollars.
Right.
So the rebate will be applied first, the PEG funds will be applied first. Hopefully, we don't use contingency, and then we just tax for the project.
But to Barney's question, the number, the 4244, doesn't already have PEG funds deducted. So the idea, if we can use PEG funds, and maybe we have leftover money, which would be
Wouldn't that be
first.
great? Yeah.
But
Okay,
You just bond less, that's all.
right. But don't we have to bond before we know the final cost?
No.
No, okay.
So to simplify it a lot, we will temporarily borrow until the project is complete. And once the project is complete and the costs are known, then we'll permanently borrow.
Got it.
So we'll only borrow as much as we need.
Okay. Okay.
are we doing the term on that? We talked about 20 versus 30. Has that decision been made?
That's your decision.
Do we do that tonight, or is that future decision?
You don't have to do it tonight. You have to do it before we borrow.
Which is,
End of the project.
End of the project.
okay, so,
I think we hold off.
Yeah.
Till we know what we're
Yes.
doing.
Yeah.
like Where we are. I'd actually open it up to the public at this point. Is there anyone who has a question about this or something? Yeah, just to state your name and your address.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, Mark
it just-
Bernstein, Peter Hans Road.
Okay.
So the town administrator used a phrase I've never heard used in this context before. He said at the warrant, we'll be asking for a Prop 2.5 override. Did you actually mean that?
Debt
Or-
exclusion.
Debt
Okay,
exclusion.
you meant debt exclusion.
Well, they're the same, but
Never
No,
expressed it that
I don't
way.
think they're,
I don't think they're
maybe
the same.
technically, but not in the minds of the voters.
Yeah.
I like debt
I
exclusion
can't
better.
speak for the minds of the voters, but it is a debt.
I can speak for the minds of the
Yeah, I
voters.
can.
Use the term debt exclusion, please.
debt exclusion.
We never called it a Prop 2.5 override.
Right.
Good
It
call,
may
Dr.
technically
B.
be, we've always called it a
Yeah.
debt, excluded debt.
Yep.
But the wording will be dictated by the
Statute.
statute, yeah. I mean, it's your standard wording on the election
No,
ballot.
but at least according to
I
this,
believe it's
isn't
a
it
debt
in here?
I don't know what
Yeah.
it would say in the warrant.
It'd say debt exclusion.
It's called the debt exclusion because you're excluding the debt from Proposition 2.5.
Right.
I wouldn't call that a Prop 2.5.
Yeah, here it is.
No.
It's something else.
That's,
Yeah, on our, the current warrant book does not say anything about Prop 2.5.
well, yeah, and just in
It
common.
describes that allowed to exempt from, oh, yes, it does, sorry. Allowed to exempt from the provisions of Prop 2.5,
Right.
so-called, the amounts required to pay for the bonds, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
It's not how the layman
Yes or no?
uses Prop 2.5, but point taken. It's debt exclusion.
Thank you.
But when we're just generally referring to it, you mean?
Ryan, to give Ryan credit, it is the same.
It is the same.
Yeah,
There's
Yes.
3 types of overrides.
yeah, okay.
Are there any further questions in the audience here? Comments? Is there anyone online that wants to talk about the police station, has a question, or the board or the OPM? Okay, seeing none, we just have to come up with a number here as to what we want to do. Do we want to go with the 4244532, or David, you had suggested maybe our contingency, raising it a little bit?
Well,
or
I mean,
rounding up the number?
You could round it up to 700, what's the point of not doing that? But, yeah, I mean, as Ryan has articulated, there are some other sources. What I don't want to get is 99% of the way and need more money and have to stop, and then we have to extend Neil and his team. So if we're confident, like, I would go to the high side to 15. Now, I haven't done the math, but, the difference between 12 and 15 is 3%. 3% of 4 million is 120K. So if Ryan feels like he can find 120K in the cushions, the seat cushions, then I'm good with that. But Yeah, it's a 100K difference, basically, right? 120K, what I said. So, I don't really care. At this point, we've crossed the barrier we said we'd never cross, so fine, so we're on the $4 million island.
We're in
I
the
mean,
Rubicon, huh?
And if you don't need the contingency, you don't end up
No, I know.
borrowing it, correct?
You don't.
That's correct.
So it's basically an option buffer.
All I'm saying is I don't think we're gonna lose people's vote if we ask for 700 or 800.
Well, and I think it also,
People who don't like cost creep will say no anyway, and then the others will be
and
fine.
I'd like to think we wouldn't inherently spend the extra money just because it's
No, I don't
there,
think we will.
Right, because
I
it's
just-
contingency and it gives you that extra cushion.
I mean, Neil made a point, right? We haven't done, I don't know exactly how you said it, but there's some risk in this project, right?
Some risk in every project.
In every
but
project, I know, but I mean, because.
Especially a building that's occupied
Exactly.
24/7 prior to
Right.
beginning a renovation.
So that's right. So if we ask for, I really, at this point, I'm ambivalent as to what we ask for.
Why don't we just go to like 4.3, and that gives us another,
Sure.
a little bit.
Are we asking, but again, I'm a little confused now. Are we gonna
Well, I'm sorry.
ask for the overage, or are we gonna ask for the total?
So we are amending last year's project. So
I have to apologize. I mean, my mom I got a medical issue, so I'm gonna be in and out.
To answer David's question, you were amending last year's vote. So you're
Right.
taking that 3.5 number and turning it into this new number from tonight.
And last time it was, the vote was 3.383,
This one.
3.5.
That was the town
Even?
meeting vote.
Can you
355.
roll down just one more line where you have
Oh,
that
yeah.
number so she can
listen,
see it?
given-
No, the other way.
no, my point was, given that
I
the
don't know
last
if it goes up
time
there.
we did it, as a specific number,
Yeah.
not rounding up or rounding down,
Right.
I would recommend we stick with the, 600 or 4244532, rather than rounding it up or down somehow.
I see, but the
No,
original
no.
down, you
I
see
don't
the
really follow that
original,
logic, but
Well, it just because, we've had this conversation a couple times before, when you round it to an even number, then some folks wonder, is this a real number? And because we gave we approved a real number at the last town meeting,
which was not a real number.
well, when I say real, I mean it was a specific
Yeah.
itemized number, and it was not an even, it's not a big deal, but it's just a suggestion, rather than
I don't want to get into
kind
debate
of
about that.
blithely rounding it up.
One of my
right now
criticisms of
without-
last year was it was a very specific dollar number, when in fact,
we didn't know.
it was an estimate.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like, just as this is an estimate.
But we've honed in on this estimate. We now have the plans done, we have this is a
We have
much
bids.
better estimate than what we were doing.
Well, you have
but-
you have a bid in hand.
We have a bid
So
in
you have
hand.
the largest 3.4 of that $4.2 million is fixed, and the other 218 and 102 is strongly restricted.
Well, then
So-
let's just leave it at the number that they're recommending, and, I mean, everything else is
Nice.
arbitrary, so.
Okay, I think, I would prefer to just leave it at the 4244532. If we encounter a significant something that we
It'll
didn't
probably be more than
anticipate.
50 grand if we do, I guess.
Yeah, then we're really into finding something major is kind of my take on it. Because I think
Mhm.
12%'s a pretty healthy contingency,
Mhm.
even for an operating building. So that's my opinion, but anyone else?
I agree with that.
I'm agnostic. Okay,
I
fair
have
enough.
no steak.
Yeah.
Do we need a vote on that, or do you just need direction on that?
Yeah, we should
Well, no,
vote.
we need a
should
vote.
I move that we present the police station article at town meeting at this new number of $4,244,532. Is that enough?
That's what we're,
No,
Yes.
but I mean, is that enough of a motion?
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Second.
okay.
Scott seconds it. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll go a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
None, one abstained, yes.
Or just
Not-
one?
not
One
present.
absent.
Not present,
Absent.
yeah.
Absent.
Okay.
Okay, moving on. All right, to the fire station renovation project.
Yes, sir.
So we heard a presentation at 2 meetings ago. Regrettably, you weren't able to attend. I know you had another professional
was not.
commitment
I
at
did.
that time.
My apologies to the board.
Yeah, well, they come up. That's part of being a professional, right? You've got to juggle these things. At this point, I think we need to determine where we're going to go with this project. And in the broadest sense, you presented, or we were presented with 3 options.
Yes.
So what do you think? Should we review those 3, or what, how do you?
So where do we end up?
I'd be happy to.
What number is it still?
And I assume you've been brought up to speed with, you're familiar with the presentation that was given, but also some of the deliberations around that?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so the 2 contracts that you have currently are Tecton, who is our designer, for 70,000. Actually, make this bigger for you. Should have done that immediately. For 70,000 and CMS for 72,500. So CMS is here, and they're being carried through the town meeting, their services in helping you so far. What still remains from the Tecton contract, in addition to what you've already received, is a cost estimate, community outreach, and a final conceptual design. So you saw a draft conceptual design. They owe you a final, some community outreach, and then a cost estimate of that design. So that is included in the 70,000 that you've already contracted and have funding for. What was prepared for you was 4 options from Tecton as to how you might move forward to fall town meeting. This is something that I requested of them based off of your conversation. So in option 1, you can see up here, you would get, and all of these include what's already been contracted. So that plus significant community outreach would be option number 1. So they would take your, complete that conceptual design and then really beef up the community outreach based off your conversation to talk about that design and to get feedback, then get a cost estimate, and that's what you would bring to town meeting in the fall for funding design decision.
Just a clarification question. When you say conceptual design, is that essentially at the level of what we saw, the first 3
It's probably a little bit more defined than that,
Okay.
but it's not a full
Right.
schematic design.
But it's enough, it's enough specificity that you could bring that to a town meeting?
It would probably be a floor plan with a site plan and a rendering of what the finished product would appear.
Okay.
That's for the 70,
That's what is owed, that's what's owned right now.
without us paying more money.
Right,
Of what is the question?
right.
Okay.
So, so in option 1, the 25,000 is a answer to what you talked about, which is then taking that agreed upon design and then really fleshing it out with the community. So that would be option 1.
Well, I think you're mischaracterizing at least what I intended to say. It's not that you would take a design and socialize it. It's that you would socialize the concept of what do we need for a fire station and then come up with a design. With this process, it's driving me crazy. We're always putting the cart before the horse. Here's the design, what do you think? That's not the way to do it. It's what do we need, what are our options, and then we take a look. So I think that this whole thing, I have to say, I think has been bass-ackwards, in my opinion.
David, I hear you, but I do want to push back a little bit on that,
Yeah.
because we started this by getting an OPM, someone
Yeah.
who could represent our interests,
Yeah.
and then we hired Tecton, which we
Yeah.
interviewed, and to go about this, and we came up with a programmatic concept that we
Yeah.
wanted. We said that there were 4 things essentially,
Yeah.
where I'm just going to run through them for the
Yeah.
public
Yeah,
too,
yeah.
but we wanted, we think there's an issue when the fire station was first designed, it was all male firefighters, now there's
Yeah,
some
no, I
gender
get that.
issues, so we think that the, facilities needed to be upgraded to accommodate the women in the fire
Yeah.
department, which is approximately 25%. We looked at the firefighter equipment and the hazardous equipment, the hazardous chemicals they're dealing with. They don't have proper decontamination
Yeah.
areas for that. So we think there's issues with firefighter safety. We also looked at the apparatus that they have in there, And there's a question as to what additional storage space do we need, interior storage space for that apparatus?
Yep.
And there's a question about what that apparatus is. Is it just ambulances? Is it just like, and that's, I think, one of the things that's still, at least in my mind, a real open question, but I think in all of ours, you know,
Right.
just listen to that. And the last thing is really, I think the biggest thing that we're dealing with, which is that we have a on-call fire force that is harder to come by. There are fewer people in town who are volunteering, we're getting them from farther out. And the chief has said, in order to keep this force the way it is, we're gonna need to build a facility that can attract them, and so that they can, you know, have better camaraderie. But it's not just that, it's actually having some quarters where people who are from outside of town can come stay overnight when they're on call, and that will add to the longevity of this type of force.
Or work
Otherwise,
during the day.
what?
Or work during the day.
day. So, in that being kind of the biggest component of this, because we have to think about how long we're designing this fire station for, because we may reach a point where it's a tipping point, where we no longer can have an on-call force, and we have to get a professional fire force for firefighters for this town. And so, given that, we said, we want you to evaluate all this, those 4 things, and do it for $10 million. That was what it's.
They couldn't, right, which they can't meet that.
Which
so,
they,
right.
which they came back and they said, here are the various options. And the lowest cost option they presented was 10 to 12 million. And it achieved, and this is where I'm gonna rely on the OPM here to explain, you know, what those options were, just to refresh our memory as to what you put forward.
So as I recall, the 10 to $12 million option provided some additional bays or additional apparatus space and a small portion of additional office and administrative areas for the department. That was the lowest cost. It was somewhere between 10 and 12 million, sort of to be determined.
And interjecting in there,
Yep.
that there was an estimated lifespan, and I don't know who came up with that, but saying potentially that we would be that would serve us for 5 years, and we really would grow out of that. Was that something you performed? It was in your report?
That was forecasted by Tecton, and
Okay.
I have to admit, Travis, I don't have that committed to memory.
Okay.
So, in concept, first option was 10 to 12, address the needs for the apparatus and equipment. Didn't really provide any of the other points that were included, or only minimally accounted for a segregated amount of the other points that were inside of the scope of the project. The next option, I think, was 15 million, 15, 16, 14, 16, somewhere in that range.
It was, yeah, I'm looking at it here, it was 14 to 16.
And that, if there were 6 goals, that was appropriately addressing, I want to say 4 out of the 6.
It was 6 out of 7.
Okay, 6 out of 7.
Why don't we just have, Ryan, do you have that? That's page, it's page 31 from the packet of to
There it is, right
select
there.
board. There it is, yeah. And the area to the right is what you were just talking about, the goals, based on, you know, what Travis was reviewing for what we said we wanted.
And then the final option was addressing it as if it were a full station. It was a much larger addition to the existing building, and it was estimated at somewhere between 27 and 30 million, which we knew was a non-starter for the town.
It still only addressed 6 out of the 7.
Well, it's the 10 million budget.
So in your judgment,
That was not
though,
addressed in any of
No,
them.
I'm saying the 27 to 30 didn't address more issues than the 14 to 16.
Well, the only,
Correct. They didn't do the 10 million budget,
Right.
didn't meet the 10 million budget. So what's the difference then between, I don't know, because the square footage is significantly different between 1 and 3, right? It's 10.5. I don't know, maybe we don't want to get into this level of detail right
Well,
now.
they had said at the time, they just did if you throw all the requirements in,
But so,
No
let me go back to,
constraints.
I
Not real.
appreciate that Travis reiterated the points for the audience, and I think it is important that we went through a process to identify those goals.
Right.
But what we did not do, we self-described, we'll call it
Building
Fire Station
committee.
Building Committee.
Right.
We haven't done jack. We didn't go out to the community and stress test those. We didn't do a deep dive with the firefighters to stress test those. We didn't do nothing but give it to these guys. They cranked it through and they present options. And now, and I'm sorry I got mad, but now take one and socialize that one. That is not a good process. It is not a good process. We need to belly up to be in a real building committee and do a process like I presume the police guys did. I know the school guys did when did that, and do a real process and really vet out for ourselves what we really need, and then commit them to helping us, make charrettes and all the
into a-
stuff they do.
Yeah.
That's what I think we need to do.
Okay.
So I blame us. I don't blame Ryan, I don't blame OPM.
well, I don't think the select board is the right,
But then we shouldn't be the
Fine.
building committee. That's fine.
I would agree
Well,
with
then
that.
Let's not
Going-
sign up for that assignment.
going forward, you can't,
Here's our issue, and this is just, we're dealing with this is not really our consultant's issue, but that we started this process and we said, let's get a building committee, or let's get a design committee.
right.
The design committee went out and said, we've got all these great ideas and we want to do this. In the select board, we said, wait a second, guys,
Yeah.
we can't like start, because they, I think, had grander vision than perhaps we did. So we said, well, let's take it back to the select board and let's
Yeah.
us figure out what, representing the town, what do we think will be sold, get through town meeting and be appropriate.
Right.
So it's on us now.
It is on
You're
us.
saying, well, let's throw it back out, but you've got to give
Well,
up
we
some
gotta do-
direction. And we gave some direction of, we thought 10 million was kind of the top cap of what we could do.
Right, and now that we know it's not, I
Yeah.
think we have to take another look at that whole thing. And I do believe we have not done our job to solicit enough opinions, especially the ones that matter.
Yeah.
I think one of the things the only thing we have done so far is to be informed, basically, that for those 4 or 5 goals that you just articulated, we have to spend more than 10 million, because we cannot achieve even we cannot achieve those goals with the budget we set. I think that was a very
Bottom
golden,
line.
the bottom line of
Realization,
of
right.
this.
Okay.
And so now we have to figure out, or you have to figure out, where do you go with that information? And which of the goals, either A, which of the goals are you willing to sacrifice? Or B, how much more are you willing to spend? And I think a third thing that we should really be thinking of is, maybe we need one other piece of information, and that is some sort of a forecast as to how long we can actually maintain an on-call fire department. We started at one point talking about regionalization of various projects, and it's taken up services, and that study has taken a back seat because we've got really busy with other things. But maybe that's another piece that has to be still at least explored and answered before you build a fire department that we may or may not end up using.
Or that we may need to think about this renovation as a transition renovation from an on-call, or with the potential for it to be a transition from an on-call to a career
Or an
fire
on-call to a
department.
satellite.
Or an on-call
Right,
to a
a satellite
career
is-
satellite fire station. I do think that's a question we, as the select board, and we should be, that is part of the community outreach conversation, I think, is to find out sort of what, in terms of cost and long-term, what kind of a fire station do we think, what are the trends and what do we see happening in terms of Carlisle's ability to maintain an on-call fire department, and therefore So this, the most expensive option was for 30 to 50 years. Well, maybe that doesn't make any sense to be thinking we need to renovate for 30 to 50 years from now if we know that we need to renovate for, something that'll last 10 years, because we know we're going to transition to something else.
And just to recalibrate a little bit. When we started this, we took some ARPA funds to get some of this pre-work done with the hope that, hey, maybe if we articulate these requirements, let's get some preliminary work done. If they come back with something that hits all the marks and is it a correct budget, maybe we'll be in a position to present something at this town meeting.
Right.
We're not at that place.
Absolutely not.
And that's fine. That's, we knew that we might not be there, and we aren't. But we do.
And we should acknowledge that we were asking Tecton, in a very condensed amount of time to come
Yeah.
up with that.
So now the question is, the next target is fall town meeting, and what can we do between now and fall town meeting in terms of answering, doing the outreach, doing the work required to get to perhaps the concept design
Right.
that we could present at a fall town
So I'm
meeting?
glad you asked that.
That wasn't a question.
That's a
Well,
statement, yeah.
Barbara and
Let
I,
him finish. Let's
No, but I think,
Did you have
so,
more you wanted to say?
so I think that involves, there is some work that still needs to be done with the initial
Yes.
funding.
exactly right.
And what we want to talk about for this town meeting is what additional funding / resource do we need to take the next step with a target of a fall town meeting, to get the information, to do the research required. And I think that's what we need to figure out is, that may cost some amount of, certainly internal time, but external funds. And what is that amount?
Right, I completely agree, and Barney and I did sort of socialize with each other some ideas. I'll give you my idea, which I kind of just made up, but it's a general framework, right? We have 5 months. We have essentially May, early May, so May, June, July, August, September. Well, May, June,
October.
July. Maybe we have 6, well, we'll have 5 months. By the time town meeting, we'll have 5 months. And we should develop a notional statement of work that, again, very roughly, I'll just say conceptually perhaps, we commit to 2 months of outreach and data gathering and organizing. We ask Tecton to then take that data, which is basically a lot of what they've done, but we've maybe curated it with more input and these other considerations, and come up with, maybe 2 designs. And then see in the ROM sense what those look like and what they think they cost, and then spend the last month or so developing the marketing campaign around whichever one or ones we want to present to fall.
And I guess my question is, I don't see this, a 5-person select board
That may
doing all
be
of that work.
absolutely true.
And so it's some form of working group that can report into the select board on a regular basis,
Yeah.
but can do the things in between these meetings.
Assuming we can get volunteers to do that in the summer, I absolutely agree.
Well,
No, I do.
but I don't think it's realistic to try to fit it into our 2
And it shouldn't be,
bi-weekly.
even if it was us, it shouldn't be only us.
No.
Right, I mean, you've got firefighters, obviously, who live in town, you've got ex-firefighters who are very knowledgeable, you've got other guys who have opinions, we should be gathering what we can.
Is it your opinion, though, that what we got is it because it was expensive, or is it a question of that you are not, of these options, you're not prepared to support one because you feel as though it's overdoing it or underdoing, what is it?
For me personally?
Yeah.
Well, I've got to credit John Lavery, I guess, and his version of, which is first, go minimal, what's the minimum thing you need? Establish that. And then you can decide what other features, we kind of went from the top down, and we started stripping stuff away, but I kind of think we got to build it up from, what is the absolute, challenge the assumptions of how much stuff has to be stored, how much of that stuff has to be stored in the building versus maybe this satellite building or a satellite building.
Or tent.
Can we, rejigger the way we were, I don't feel like there's been that kind of rigor into how we got to the solution. I could be wrong, but that's my feeling.
And so, just so I'm clear, our OPM, were you involved in that with Tecton?
Yes.
At all? So were you evaluating that? as far as so they reached out to the police department, fire
Yes.
department, and, and I remember there were surveys, and we got caught up in like
Yeah.
all this, but they provided you information as to what the fire department thought was needed.
Appropriate, yes.
Appropriate. And then explain your process there.
So there was a programming session with several members of the fire department, as well as an outreach to the general membership, 20-plus people that were asked to fill out a survey of what their priorities were related to the station and any subsequent project that would come of it. During the programming piece, we literally broke it down, practically room by room, what's needed, what do you currently have, what would you need under ideal circumstances, and then sort of a fallback of, well, if it's not ideal, then what would be the minimum amount that you could live with? And that was essentially what was provided.
That was the lowest price option?
The,
Or
no, the lowest price option was derived essentially because we felt that it was extremely it would have been irresponsible or non-responsive of us to come back with a solution that didn't meet all of your goals. So there was a real desire, at least from my side of the table, to say, hey, listen, they gave us a $10 million ceiling. We need to give them a $10 million solution. Well, we're not listening to them, right? So there was a question of if the number is what's driving this, we need to have something to come back to them that meets that objective. So that was sort of part one. So that was the short-term solution. And then we objectively evaluated that and said, okay, for $10 million, what's the most that we can do for $10 million? And how many goals does that address, as was outlined in the original RFQ? So that was sort of our methodology for getting to that $10 million solution. So we looked at it, we said, okay, for $10 million, we can give them this much square footage, and then based on that square footage, this is what gets addressed on the original goal. So we almost reversed engineered it, starting from the number, right? And then when we looked at the middle option, we did the same thing, only we sort of built it the other way. We said, okay, we can provide bays, we can provide some administrative space, but the objective was not to renovate the interior of the existing building to a great extent, to not touch that. So we looked at what we could do, and then how that flowed in to the estimate after that was how we developed the middle ground option, excuse me. Does that answer your question? I think?
This was also done on a very tight time frame. I mean, this was,
Yeah,
Yeah.
like over 10 weeks. It was a really tight
Yeah.
Tight
yeah,
effort.
Which we recognize.
Right.
But we didn't have, at least, I guess you had seen these options before we actually were presented them at the select board meeting.
No, I
Not
hadn't seen them.
really.
No, I had
Okay.
a conversation with Neil just to have some context of
Got it.
what we were gonna be
Right.
seeing.
So I think part of it was receiving the presentation and not.
It's a
and we-
lot to
we-
digest.
And, you know,
Truly.
you can also say, hey, the select board, I was the lead person that started asking about the survey numbers, that we kind of derailed things, and I understand the idea was to make a whole presentation, but we didn't have the opportunity to sort of go back and forth about how did you arrive at this, and did you consider this, and what is involved in, the cost-effective materials, what did that actually mean? We haven't had an opportunity to do that at all.
like a working session. We haven't had a working
No,
session.
right,
Exactly.
Right, so, yeah, so I think if, I share some of David's concern that we haven't dug into stuff enough to be able, as a select board / building committee, say that we would support any one of these three options with confidence. I don't feel I could do that now, whether it's for the fall town meeting or for spring,
Right.
right? Based on how much discussion we've actually had. So And I do think being able to take this to various boards and committees in town that are already volunteers that are playing a leadership role in the town, to get feedback on some of the major questions. One is the total cost, and also how much, the sort of how much do we create a really nice residence workspace. You know, some of the bigger questions about this, we don't have any input from anybody else but ourselves at the moment. So that's why I support the idea of trying to, figure out what's the best way to both have some of those real working sessions about what we know right now, what's being proposed, as well as get input from the community here in Carlisle about what it is they would want to have and how much would they be willing to spend for that, as well as this question of the on-call versus transitioning to a different approach in terms of our fire safety here in town. That we do those things almost concurrently. And then go back to Tecton to say, okay, we've got some more data, we know better sort of what we would feel confident having you use now as your sort of goals or, specifics for then coming back with a more developed design and cost estimate that we get ready for the fall town meeting.
But I think there's a real benefit to having both CMS and Tecton involved in that process.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, no, yeah.
I would not suggest that it's a good idea to do it on your own.
Oh, no, I wasn't
Okay.
suggesting that
All right,
at all.
I thought I
No,
heard something that
Sorry.
indicated that, but if I
No.
misheard, I'm sorry.
No, my reference to going to boards, other boards and committees of volunteers in town was that we are all doing that together and we figure out
Yes.
what's the right way to do that. But it basically goes to a number of different groups in town to give us feedback, yeah.
So I was just asking, Ryan, he was starting to present options to us, and the question is, I mean, you've been through this, Tecton's been through this. Do one or more of the options address that kind of process and workflow that we would want to consider between now and fall, in terms of what the cost would be, what the process would be?
Yes.
So do we want to hear what those options were?
But also, there's no timeline, there's no,
You're talking about like the 60% solution and all that jazz?
No, this is the
options in this,
the
in the
specific
packet.
money we would ask for at town meeting to fund us to the
No,
fall.
I know, but
Oh,
they were around one solution. Do you want the 50% fidelity, the 60%, like, no, we don't want any of those, right? I didn't understand that approach at all. Given we don't know what we want, why would we want a higher fidelity on something we don't know we want yet?
oh, yeah, that's,
Isn't that what they were proposing?
Just if I could spend 1 minute just zooming out. So originally, you had farmed this decision out to a group, and that group made a decision, and you didn't like the decision because you didn't trust or have high fidelity in the decision.
Because the architect selected came back with a huge cost,
So
right?
That's what he's saying.
that
No,
process.
well, he's saying we didn't like it. I mean, but it's that it was too
You
expensive.
didn't trust that that high cost one was the one that was needed.
Yeah.
I don't think that's unfair to say. So that's why you hired people to help guide you in the process. And then the second thing I'll say is you've asked me to rush you in this process, and I just want to remind why. So if this was to take 2 more years, then that unacceptable base level cost is going to become what is the middle option right now. So you will get, for the middle option price, you will get the worst possible option just because of the way costs are escalating. And I hope I'm wrong there. I hope the world turns around and things get cheaper. And the second piece is, and I trust my department heads, I do, your department heads are telling you that they need help in order to recruit and retain volunteer firefighters. The current way we're going is not going to work forever. So the speed in this decision is for those 2 reasons: to try and retain that call firefighter approach, which is slowly fading away because of socioeconomic reasons, and also because costs are just going bananas. So any process is possible, but you do have those constraints, which is why you asked me to rush you through the design process this winter.
Right.
And building on that, I just want to say, we hired our OPM, CMS, with the intention that they were going to help guide us to get us comfortable that because in the prior process, you just had an architecture firm, and the architecture firm says, oh, we need all this, and we wanted some kind of third-party, person. We interviewed
Right.
CMS and selected them because this is what they do. They design, or they work on building fire stations, and so we got comfortable that they're experts. We're not experts at this, and they're saying, this is what you need to do, and that's why we were asking, well, what did you do in your interface with the fire department to push back or to understand? They're the expert doing that. So the question is, if we trust those experts, then we're kind of in this position right now. We've got these different options. Now, it's not to say we can't tweak those options, and that's kind of what David, I think you're talking about a little bit, but I don't think it's necessarily to throw everything out and, start over. No, he's doing something.
No, but
No,
I
I'm
think,
listening, I'm
but
listening, but
I
I
think
don't-
even for me, and maybe it was a function of the presentation itself or how it was presented, is I wouldn't be comfortable taking any of those options to the town and saying, let's commit
Yeah,
14.
not yet.
I need more, it needs more vetting, it needs,
Right.
they talk to the fire department, has that vetting, but we need to talk to other stakeholders and get,
Right.
there needs to be a process
Right,
around.
so
it.
we're all agreeing, so I would just exculpatory question. How much is unspent? You asked, I think, in a separate letter that it's taken more months, so we need some more money for, it was kind of a monthly rate, right?
Yes.
And they're saying, you're kind of saying, and they're also sort of saying, we haven't spent all the money we have spent. So how much money is left right now? I presume Tecton is not spending money on this program at the moment, right? They're kind of on hold?
Half.
Half is left, is
Yeah,
how much is
about
left?
There's 70,000.
And what's remaining is a final conceptual design, which includes the talk to get there, the community outreach about that
Right.
particular design, and a cost estimate
Yeah,
of
but
it.
I'm not, Brian, I'm not so concerned with what piece of the SOW have you not yet completed? I'm like, stop spending, here's a new SOW, what does this cost? Let's deduct what we haven't spent, that's what we have to fund, right? I mean, I don't think whatever they said they signed up for is even relevant. I think I agree with Scott. There's a new process for the next X months, and tell us what it's gonna cost you to support that. Tell us what it's gonna cost you to support that. How much of what we've already authorized is there, and how much more do we gotta ask at town meeting?
That's what I thought we asked last time.
What?
I think that was the question we asked last
But
time.
we get a different, I mean, they're hung up on what we told them contractually. It's like,
Yeah.
don't worry about that, this is the new spec. That's what I would say.
What are your thoughts?
It's okay to.
I mean, we have to find, we have,
appreciate
we have to,
we'd like
I think
your
we're committed to moving this thing
comment.
forward, and we're committed to having a substantive proposal at fall town meeting. So how do we get from wherever we are right now to there? It's a lot of, it's more vetting, it's more outreach, it's,
I don't understand how what you're saying is different than finalizing a design, outreaching, and getting a cost estimate for that design.
I think if I hear you right, David, you don't want to say, well, let's pick option two, like.
Yeah, they're like
number
option
two,
two,
now we're
then I'll
gonna sell that.
socialize, I'll give you
Lock
a
it
charrette.
in, we're gonna
That costs
sell
a
that.
lot, right.
Where you're saying that there's more, let's target one of the options and let's dig into it and do more molding of it to either confirm or make some adjustments as needed to get to a final concept.
Could be wrong, but what was described to me that we were trying to bring to this town meeting, what was said was, without a picture and a cost, that no one was gonna support the big ask. So I'm assuming that still applies in the fall.
Yes.
Yes.
So you will need to consolidate around a conceptual design, a cost estimate, and outreach that.
Right, but I would say in different order. Outreach,
Outreach first.
conceptual design, cost, outreach.
Sure, so that's what
Okay.
they still owe you, and they're saying that plus
More outreach.
more robust community outreach, which is really just more of their time, is another 25,000.
Okay.
What I've interjected and will probably immediately withdraw is the more fidelity you can get in that design process, going to fall town meeting is going to make that number better.
More reliable.
Because what was discussed with police station during this round, lesson we learned is, well, the number changed $1 million. Well, that's why it changed $1 million, because you didn't have a high fidelity.
Right.
So I was just bringing it in front of you to try and authorize more design time so that we can shorten and increase the fidelity and shorten the design on the other side if we're trying to sprint to Springtown meeting. If that time frame doesn't exist and we want to pull back, then it's fine to just do the.
I think we rushed, we got these designs, and there's concerns or questions.
We
and
didn't-
we
yeah, we
need-
didn't have
And so
enough.
we didn't have enough time, and that
Right.
was, you know.
Well, and honestly, I think what we were talking as a $10 million project, that we're all kind of, if you tell me 12 to 14, it's going to be 16 to 18. So now, to me, a $10 million project is close to a $15 to $20 million project. And
I hope it's not.
well, the cheapest viable option was 12 to
12.
14.
No,
So-
cheapest was 10 to 12.
Well, that was about-
But that will be.
But there is,
It was the
to me,
cheapest,
there's
but not the
there's a
most
clear
efficient
scope
way.
change. If they came back and said, hey, we can do all your requirements and it's $8 million, we probably would have said, hey, let's.
We're going to town meeting.
So I do think it's partly the product of, we have a lot of big projects in this town, we've more in the pipeline, and so we really need to make sure we spend a little extra time and a little extra money to sell it, to make sure it's right, to get the community's buy-in, so that we can get it passed at town meeting. And I don't think, like right now, even if we all supported this project in its current form, I don't know that the community would support it, given, you know, the lack of detail and outreach behind it, just the socializing of it, right? So that work needs to happen.
If I can just offer some perspective,
Yeah.
within the proposal that we have, whether it's a schematic design to address Dave's concerns, or whether it's a concept design or whatever else, in addition to that, there's a certain amount of, I'll call it site investigation.
Yeah.
That really makes sense to do. If there is commitment to the project,
Yeah.
you're going to have to do this now or later, and it really happens sort of aside from the designer's efforts, but it will help shape what options they present in terms of what the site will allow and how those might relate to bylaws and other restrictions that you have within the community that may affect how the site is utilized. So I agree with the outreach, I agree with keeping it conceptual to some degree, but I think there's a lot of other things that we can be doing now to better use the time and get you to bid date sooner, which ultimately is gonna save you folks money.
And I'm
So with
assuming
this-
some of that information would also inform the
The
design.
design, yeah.
Exactly,
You wouldn't want to fall in love with a concept and then only to realize, well.
that
we
it's
can't-
sitting on
Site
ledge,
doesn't- Yeah.
Right.
So
right?
who-
Or
Yeah, who would do the site work, the
it would
investigation?
be underneath Tecton's umbrella,
Uh-huh.
and it would be services that they would provide through vendors to,
But separate from the
that
design.
would come in, survey,
Folks,
wetlands
yeah.
delineation,
Yeah,
That's phase 2.
Title V
option.
investigations.
this one's,
Those five.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this has more.
Wetland topo,
Right.
environmental, test pits, and the geotechnical.
Right.
How much of that, from a very high level, how much of that work is design independent, meaning it's just,
You're gonna
Doesn't matter
you're
whether
gonna
you-
have to do that whether you do
And
option 1 or option 9, which
And-
I'm pretty sure we're gonna get to eventually.
but the actual specific items that fall within that aren't necessarily contingent on a particular?
No.
Okay, so
No.
this is just
Nope,
basic
they're
foundational
gonna
work.
survey the lot. And they're gonna determine where the boundaries are, so we can have setbacks and reasonable information that we can go in and say, okay, we've got 15 feet to work with on the front of the building before we run into a setback issue.
Yep.
And we've got 20 feet on each side that we can do, and this is where the septic field has to go, because it's what's not impacted by wetlands or high groundwater or whatever else. So, again, I think there's a lot of things that we can be doing over and above concept and outreach and
Yeah.
community development and whatnot, that is gonna drive the design and ultimately the solution that's presented.
Neil, can you do that timing-wise? Because I think we got in a little having our troubles here because we tried to do things so quickly and we didn't have time to go through a process with the town and get enough feedback and us thinking about it and everything. Can you professionally get,
I
it takes
think-
45 days, 60 days to do a site survey, wetland survey?
I do. I think you can do that. And the reason being is because largely it's done by independent parties. You have one person that's doing the survey, you have one person that's doing geotech, you have one person that's doing wetland flagging, and they're not necessarily the same people.
Right, and then you take all that data, you go back to Tecton, they say, oh, we didn't realize this, then they have to kind of put those constraints. Can they do all that, though? We were talking about, 5 months?
I think that we can.
62,000.
And have enough time to then have the community, and, well, the select board and really the community, weigh in, participate in that in some capacity.
I do. I do think it is possible. I think we also have to get moving.
Yeah.
So that,
Frankly.
so that would look like option one, which is some variation of a design, consolidated design outreach with a cost estimate, in addition to the robust community outreach, which will help get you to that point, to include, I'm sure, working with the building committee and/or you. And then everything that he just talked about under the current proposal is 62,000 for a total town meeting of ask of around 125,000 of new money.
When you say option one, what does that correspond to on this Tecton? Because there's a phase one, then there's a phase two, phase two option one, phase two option two,
these are your
phase
own
two
options,
option
right?
three. What are those four, what do they correlate back to?
Yep.
Aren't they just your options?
So is it the same
I
four?
translated them, I tried to simplify them.
Oh,
Back
okay.
to Tectons?
So-
Okay.
But if we were to do what, get the various pieces of the site investigations done, which my understanding is it's under Tecton's umbrella, but they get people different from the designers, the architects, right? They have
Independent contractor.
independent contractors, and those are gonna be discrete tasks that different contractors would do for us.
So that's what I was just describing too, but
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to jump around a little bit on this document, so
Okay.
I tried to put it all in the one spreadsheet, but I'll
Okay.
walk you through it. So the current 70,000 is broken down here, which is the space needs assessment, which you're currently working through, some design at some point, maybe two, a cost estimate, and that community outreach. Tecton saying another $25,000 in outreach money to meet the robustness of your request and all the way to town meeting. Plus, wetlands flagging, topo, environmental assessment, test pits, and geotechnical borings and analysis, which combined is 62,000.
But if you go up, Ryan, to the first part, I just want to be clear, you said they spent about half, so I presume they've done phase 1A, like, Neil, which of those phases are complete versus?
They've
Under
done
the
the
breakdown.
space needs assessment. They've largely done a couple of different conceptual
yeah,
designs.
right.
And they have not done a cost estimate, and they have done limited, if any, community outreach.
All right, so they've spent about 47, okay, so fair enough.
it was 22.5.
So what I want to make sure is that we don't simply then take phase 1C designs and do more outreach on it. That was kind of my opening salvo, half an hour ago.
I don't believe that that's the case, Dave. I believe that they're intending to further develop other concepts
Okay. I mean, I
in
think we need-
addition
right.
to what they have, and then bringing them back in whole.
Because, I mean, I don't want
As
to speak
to
for
what
them, but
makes
25K doesn't seem like much add-on for what we're talking about from a process. If they're okay with it, I want to make sure that we're kind of repeating the process again, so.
Well, I think, David, the question is on the schematic design that Tecton would provide. Right now, my understanding is the conceptual design phase 1C is fairly limited, and that if we wanted to bring something
Right.
like they're describing here, 60% schematic design,
Yeah.
and then the last option, 100%, that would cost us additional money.
I know, but
than
Barney-
what's- No, I'm just, hang on a sec. That would cost more than what the conceptual design is listed at up there. And so one of the questions we need to answer, and I think we've kind of partially answered it, we would like to have more before we go to fall town meeting on the on the
Right,
schematic
exactly.
design.
Well, on even the conceptual, because
Yeah.
if I say to you, let's say you did this, and I'm like, Barney, I love, you know, like, as they say in Hollywood, I love your thing, just change one little thing, right? Which means if I don't like it, we're gonna do it completely over again, right? So if I say that, and I say, you know, that those 3 concepts, I'm ripping them up, please start over. You're gonna say, okay, I don't need maybe 1A anymore, because I've done that. But I need another 37, or maybe I need 50 to do a couple more, and then I'll go to all these site things and blah, blah, blah. So I just want to make sure I'm not trying to add more money to them, but I want to make sure there's clarity that we're not going with those things, we're going with some new thing, and it's going to require them to repeat that piece of the process.
It's almost like we want to take their possibility space, chuck out the one with the 5-year
Right.
lifespan and the $30 million one. Let's look at that low one
And explode it out
and
into.
just,
Yes.
let's see what we can do there. We have some ideas that have been out there, but let's live in that space and see if we can,
Right.
maybe we find a $11 million option or a $14 million,
Sure.
but that,
The intention is not to build what you don't need or drive the cost
Sure.
up unnecessarily. We want to give you exactly what you want at the lowest possible price that we can. And to get there is going to be a struggle, but we'll get there. I'm confident in it. And it's just going to take time. And I do believe that we have enough time to move forward, but we need to move forward with diligence, I think.
Well, we've kind of come to I wouldn't say a conclusion, but I wanted to ask the fire chiefs here. We have the former fire chief, we have lots of interested parties online. I want to give them an opportunity to ask questions or talk about what we've been talking about
Community
and see
outreach.
if there's any, further things that we should know. So I'd start with you, Chief Soros, if you want.
I'm Chief Soros, current fire chief. I think the one thing that I would add is, I think a lot of what drove the initial, what they were looking at is also an FDA standards. There are standards for a lot of these things. It wasn't just us coming pie in the sky. This is the size things should be, and in fact, what they were coming up with was the standard is, you know, a bigger space here, more safety there, and those kinds of things for some of the things we're looking at. And we took that and we cut it down quite a bit. I mean, I welcome us trying to vet it out, but I think you are probably, like you have ended up, with taking the middle one and seeing what we can vet on that. I think not doing these things and ending up with a career department, I don't think is going to end up good for the town in terms of the kinds of services you have and the kind of risks that we have in our town. So I encourage us to come up with a good solution here.
Would you like to speak, former chief?
Chief Flannery?
David Flannery, I was fire chief for the last 16 years before Chief Soros, but on the fire department for longer than I would like to admit. I just want to do one thing, which is to validate the architect that you have. I had not heard of Tecton before, but I did watch their presentations, albeit not when they were going on, but later thanks to YouTube. I had spent a significant amount of time in the time I was chief, which was 16 years, to have my thumb on the expansion of the fire station every year by studying the national trends, square footage costs, the types of things that were happening in the fire service that would change, design, what we needed, what would happen if this happened, what would happen if that happened, and just kept right up with it up till when I left. And it's, if you went back and read my town reports that I made, a lot of the things that I was thinking of, I was ready to go for this day. Let's just put it that way. What I want to say is that the fire service has changed so much in that period of time. And today, the health and safety is one of the most important things that we need to consider in this building. We can't have apparatus outside in the rain and the cold that we need to use in an emergency. We have to have spaces to, let's call it, gather in whether it be an eating space or a meeting space like this, a large enough space to have a class of 30 or 40 people. We can't host a EMT training in our own community to keep our call people in the community, or any large training in our own station, because we just don't have the room, and that's a negative. There's a lot of things that are pretty much prescriptive in designing, and Tectron will tell you that. If you design a fire station, you have to have these elements. If you're building a school, there's certain things you need. If you're building a hospital, there's certain things you need built in. They can be smaller or bigger, and they can be real flashy with fancy roofs and design on the outside. I don't think we're looking for that. We're looking for spaces that are necessary. But I also think the last thing I'll say is we have to think of the future. Now, we don't want to build something that we don't need and big and not spend the money. You're in a difficult position because looking at the town's finances and what we have for capital going forward, it's a real challenge of what we have. But we need this. This is a priority for our future and our community. What's going to happen with the Carlisle Fire Department, we don't know. But we do know, just like we watch the weather, when the clouds come dark and you see lightning flash and things happening, you know what's going to happen next. This has been going on for a long time in the volunteer and call service. And you talk to all the chiefs in New England, there's very few departments like us. And it's because of the dedication of the people and the leadership. We made a commitment to it. We can continue to foster that by designing some friendly things in the building that will allow us to make it a place they want to be. And the chiefs articulated that a little bit. I started some of that when we went for the outside mobile trailer to take some of the load off the building, put it out there, and lighten things up. We had people that would work in the building on their computer because they can work at home, and they'd be on call in the station. And there's a call, they drop what they're doing and they go. So that kind of thing, if we don't make the space for that, it's not an attractive thing. But I do think, just like we did in the spa, in the Grant building when we built it, I was an advocate that the architect design into that building the foundation and the roof, a cement roof. So if we need an escape hatch in the future, that we should do that. It was very difficult to convince people. They did it, and it didn't cost a lot of money. And in 10 years, we built the second floor.
Right.
And we had kids in school. So, you need to be forward-looking and thinking creatively on when we design. We need to talk to the architect about that. So maybe we don't need this particular space now, but we may need it in the future. Can we design it in there so we can expand in the future? And we're not locked in. Remember, this is our site. And this gentleman made a very important statement to you tonight about that site. There are problems there. It's full of ledge. You have the swamp. You need septic. The well's in one spot. There's no parking. You can go up. You can go up. You don't want an elevator, and I agree with that. We can go up. So we have some problems that need to be, worked out. Then we have the historical element, because neighbors don't want to be looking at a Butler building, like a DPW building. They want to look at something, that was a big thing when we built this building that we have here. So you're smart to go slower with the brakes on right now and think about these things and work with the chief. He knows what he needs. I knew what we need, and I had a whole list. I left it for him. So he knows what I was thinking of, and I think we can come out of this and do it, but it's not going to be 10 million. When I left, and I had my thumb on, the square footage stuff, it was 17. That was in my mind of what that needed. That was 6 years ago. So if you can do it between 13 and 14, maybe we can do it creatively. I think we can do it. But that's the process I think we should need, and I applaud you tonight for taking the time. It's been over an hour that you've been discussing it, and I do appreciate it, because I think it's time well spent.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room who has questions or comment on this process of the fire department? All right, I'm going to go online. We have, I see, is Dave, or Dave Newman?
John Newman?
Dave, no, Dave.
Newman?
Oh, Newman, yeah, right there, David.
Did you want to
Yeah.
say anything,
Hey.
Dave?
Yeah, I thought I'd just add one or two things to what Chief Flannery said there. point of view of someone who works in the station, just so you can kind of get a sense of what this looks like day to day for people that are listening. You know, I did a CPR class over the weekend in our classroom. We could only fit 9 people in there. So we can't hold a class for more than 9 people. You know, today we pull a truck back into the bay. It had gone out for service, came back in. So the exhaust from that truck is blowing onto the water cooler and onto someone's gear. So if you can picture a fire truck blowing exhaust into, you know, into your closet at home where all of your clothes are that you wear every day. That's what. Next week on Tuesday, we have Children's Hospital coming in to do an advanced pediatric simulation lab with some of our EMTs. So that class we have to do in the kitchen. So we're doing a pediatric sim lab in our kitchen, you know, that's the only place that we can have it now. Our EMS supplies are held in a portable rolling cabinet, which we don't have enough room in there, so some of them get held underneath my desk. There's not really enough room there, so we keep some of them in the classroom, which doesn't have enough room, so we keep other supplies out in a tent outside behind the station. So when anyone is looking for supplies, they have to look in all these different places to figure out where we have EMS supplies that they need at, you know, 2 in the morning when they get back from a call. So I mean, I could kind of keep on going, but I just wanted to give you some examples of what, you know, the current station, which we love and we like working in there, but, you know, just some examples of kind of how we've started to outgrow that station. And, you know, like Neil was saying a little while ago, you know, how we wound up with some of the priorities and, you know, around safety and usability and operability that you know, that went into the program that came out of this.
Okay, thanks, David. I go next to John Lavery.
No, Tom Bellata had his hand up first. I'll let him go if he wants to.
All right. Tom, would you like to go? Go ahead.
Sure. Tom Bellata, Nathan Lane. I've been involved with the fire station project for about 2 years, both as a member of a couple committees and just an observer. And we've tried several attempts, none of which has yet produced the desired result, even though we're all, I think, very committed to the concept that we need to have an on-call department. Looking back at that, I really believe that's because we haven't defined up front what folks are supposed to do. I think that dates back to the original $30 million Taj Mahal. If you're gonna go this way, I'd strongly encourage you to prioritize what is needed. It is clear to me that there are 2 top priorities, and those are firefighter safety and on-call recruitment. Those are the 2 top priorities. I just don't, you know, bay capacity does not cut it. The proposal that came in with bay capacity number 1 shows that I don't think those folks understand the priorities. We as a volunteer, we're a community with volunteer firemen relying on town leadership to assure they're operating safely. That has to be number 1. We cannot have volunteers operating unsafely. To me as a citizen, that's just totally unacceptable. Bay capacity is another story. You know, there's multiple opinions on that. Do we really need a ladder truck? Is a question that has to be asked. That looks like a $5 million question. You know, $2 to $2.5 million on the building today, and maybe $2.5 million to buy a new ladder truck in a couple of years. That ought to be mutual aid, in my estimation. So we have to define the priorities. Tech 10 can't possibly succeed if they don't know what their goal is. It ought, in my opinion, be $10 million. I'm absolutely convinced this can be done for $10 million based on my involvement to date. But you need to set priorities. Is it firefighting safety or bay capacity? How do we effectively store all this ancillary equipment that folks would like to have? That's my input.
Thank you. I would like to follow up and have Neil, if you wouldn't mind, weighing in on that, because in my mind, we've hired your firm to kind of be our representative on working with the fire department, but also with your expertise, your professional judgment as to what is needed and what isn't needed. And so that kind of comment is I think, an important comment, but I think it needs to be addressed by,
I
a
think,
professional too.
honestly, Travis, and respectfully, I think that's a decision that the community has to make. I don't think that should be my decision based on my experience, because every single community that we serve is different, and everybody has different needs, and this is a very unique community. So I think it's very hard for me to apply my experience and say to the chief, hey, listen, I don't think you need that apparatus. believe me, if my house was in Carlisle and it was burning, I would want him to bring everything to put the fire out. I think it puts me in a very difficult position to dictate what's necessary and what isn't.
Okay.
Wow, that's such a dodge. I cannot believe it.
All right, John
I'm
Lavery,
sorry.
you can weigh in. What do you have to say?
Don't sugarcoat it, John.
Sorry, that was such a dodge. That's exactly why we hired you, is to try to make that call. And if you're not gonna make that call, then we don't want you. Sorry about that. When I was listening to this, I was really struck by a couple of comments. David's original comment, of what? What are we designing here? And that goes to Tom's comments and other people's comments as well. We've never done a bottom-up assessment of needs versus wants. And unless you do that, actually, let me start over a little bit. That's how you do project management. What you guys are doing, I don't know what you want to call it, but it's not project management that I've ever seen in a 40-year professional and construction career. This is just not how you do it. You start off by defining the problem, then you make a list of the feature set with prioritizing needs versus wants. You work through it, you vet it. The design is way down the list. And we haven't done that. And to your credit, some of you have recognized that and vocalized that. Before we determine design and wetlands marking and any of that stuff, we really have to determine what the needs are of the town, and we haven't done that. And you guys mentioned that you had gone through an objective process with Tecton defining needs versus wants. Well, how does an objective process defining needs versus wants yield a boat in Carlisle? And space for a boat. What do we need a boat for? Same question for the ladder truck. I've tried to document as best I could how many times the ladder truck is actually used every year to put out a fire. It's basically not used. It's a recruitment tool. It's just a big, fancy, expensive recruitment tool. And if you guys decide that you want to build a space to accommodate this ladder truck, you also are doing what Tom said. You're buying into another $2.5 or $3 million a couple years down the road. You're committing the town to that because the one we have is obsolete. And Chief Flannery's comment about keeping stuff outside, well, that's his fault. When we got the new tanker that we have now and the old tanker got moved outside, long-term capital told Chief Flannery, look, we're not building you a new fire station or an expansion on the fire station to accommodate that extra tanker. We want you to sell it. He never did. It's been sitting outside, useless for half the year ever since. It cannot be a critical need in Carlisle if it's only useful 6 months a year. It can't be a critical need, and you shouldn't be designing space around it, like Tecton has come up with. Those are probably my three biggest pieces of need versus wants feedback. As far as the antique fire trucks, maybe they are a recruitment tool, maybe they aren't, but they don't belong in the station because they're not functional pieces of equipment.
Oops.
That wasn't me.
Sure.
You're back. Hold on. You gotta, okay. We lost you for a second, but I'd like you to wrap up, John. I mean, this is very helpful.
Sorry.
It is helpful.
Fine. Until I interjected there, I was kind of at a loss of even what to say because you guys don't do project finance like I understand it. I mean, project management like I understand it. You have to begin with an assessment of needs versus wants, and you have to have somebody or some entity that's willing to push back on the fire department and say no. And no one's willing to do that. And at the end of the day, we're not going to let you, we the town are not going to let you get away with shuffling this off on somebody else. You guys are going to stand up before the town and defend what you've come up with. And so you need to have a clear rationale for needing some equipment versus others, and in turn dictating all the spaces you need. I'm kind of with Tom on health and safety is the first priority, and then recruitment after that. And we don't need a lot of the other spaces that we've got in the plan so far.
All right, thanks for your comment, John. Is there anyone else online who wants to comment or has a question? I think these are important discussions to have. I know this is publicly airing a lot of different opinions, which is important. Is there anyone on the board that wants to respond, or you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. Chief Sars, I hope you don't mind if I ask you this. So, John Lavery refers to the ladder truck and that it's, I think, John, you said it's going to be obsolete or something, or in a few years it's going to be obsolete. Would you give us your professional opinion about the ladder truck that we have and its useful life going forward?
So other than some minor things, it is still a state-of-the-art ladder. State-of-the-art, we bought it, and it still is. Its projected life was to 2030. I do not see any reason it doesn't last for quite a bit longer than that, and it's, in this region, it is not uncommon for departments like ours to keep their ladders past their projected life. I mean, you want to have a projected life, but this is not uncommon. I don't see any reason why it is not going to last for quite a bit longer. The other thing that is happening is the style of building that we're getting is one where a ladder truck is actually more important than it used to be. Something called lightweight construction, where these roofs collapse a lot more quickly, and you need to, if you have something in the attic, you need to get it out quickly. Having a pre-piped waterway made all the difference in a fire we had within the last year and a half in this town. It put it out where we would have lost the house possibly without that.
So you're talking about the new homes that are being built here in Carlisle, like, well, maybe don't need to describe, say that for the homeowners that are in them, but that they're built with different materials that are more susceptible to more serious collapse, yeah. Okay.
I'd like to add just to the ladder truck discussion, because I was with Chief Koenig when we proposed the ladder to the town, and the reasons why. There were two reasons why. One was, with a very limited staff, call staff at a scene, for 3 people to get a 28-foot or 32-foot ladder off the truck and up while the fire is raging is very difficult. It's quicker to put a ladder up and get it to the roof where firefighters might be working, cutting a hole for their safety. So that was number one, the speed, the efficiency. And you also have to be able to get the water sometimes over the fire, and you can, and rather than put a person up on the ladder with a hose, which is very dangerous, you can use a ladder pipe. It's piped up to the, and it's a remote nozzle that can put the water over the fire. That's an important firefighting aspect. But more importantly, the truck is more than a ladder, than what we call a stick in the fire service. It carries self-contained breathing apparatus with multiple air change bottles. We don't have any way to refill bottles at the scene when a firefighter breathes his 30-minute bottle out. And so you have to carry multiple bottles. It carries, I've lost the count there, but there's a lot. It has a full complement of ground ladders. It has rescue tools. It has medical gear and a host of other equipment. But more importantly, it has a fire pump. It can be put in a relay where maybe the ladder isn't needed to move water over a very long distance with a very large pumping capacity. Most ladder trucks that are bought by other communities do not have pumps. We bought it. It's a little more expensive to buy with a pump. But because we don't have municipal water, we're in the business of moving water several thousand feet, and you need big pumps. And the ladder truck is a key element in the strategic plan for water supply. That is very important. These are the things that the community do not understand, which I put into my letter, which I sent to the board, because we need to do some education on this. People don't understand. They think it's a big, expensive piece of equipment. And the other comment that I'll make is about Carlisle. You know, Carlisle, you know, 2.5 story, they're not 2.5 story, they're 3 story. And, you know, you can't put a 24-foot ladder on a 3-story building. It just doesn't happen. And when you have ground ladders that are made for the fire service, they're not like your homeowner's pinion ladder. They're extremely heavy, and you have to train people on the department to use them. Some people that are called people are not adept at learning those skills. And you can't count on the people that have those skills to be on that truck when it goes. It's a challenge of a call fire department, the chief knows what I'm talking about, but this is the way we operate. So the ladder truck, if you can train people to use it, which we've had people that have learned how to use it, is much more efficient and safe for the community.
Best explanation we've heard
Yeah.
in many a long year.
Right.
Did you have?
I don't, as I
Yeah, I mean, I think all of this points to what we were talking about earlier, which is, and the answer may not be the one we like, but it maybe we need a big old, you know, garage, basically. But if we go stepwise, as John articulated and we sort of articulated, I think I would feel better. You know, some of the, and you framed it well, Travis, in the beginning, you know, there's a balance of storage of equipment, safety, I agree, absolutely, safety's paramount. And then all the other ancillary things, we didn't touch on everyone, you know, the training and this and that and workspace, all of that. So, but there has to be a trade line, and it just didn't strike me as methodical enough in that way. Now, Neil may disagree, but, and one thing that was, we haven't mentioned in this meeting tonight, but the idea of a satellite storage, which was down the street, I kind of like that one, but I don't know, and it would be up to the professionals to say whether that's practical for the things that are maybe not used as frequently. Can you run down there and, you know, because as David points out, there's problems when you try to put big vehicles with all this other stuff. I mean, that's just a natural thing. And so we're paying a premium in a way, not only because there's ledge and all this and that, but also because we're trying to do multi-things in a space.
In one space, yeah.
That kind of stuff really, you know, should get a little more, I think we should spend a little more time, so.
From what I heard too, from the kind of leading objections to this from Tom, well, not objections, but, you know, different viewpoints from Tom and from John is, Lavery, is that, you know, the bay, the extra bay, the size of the bays is the thing. Nobody's arguing about, you know, saying we don't need health and safety apparatus, or we, you know, hazard to decontamination areas. And no one's saying, you know, that the on-call, we are gonna need some of these rooms for training, and I think Dave Newman made a great point about, you know, how can you do this training if you don't have the proper, you know, facility? So I think that, you know, using a few people on this meeting as just different viewpoints, but as really representative of different viewpoints in town, you know, that isn't the issue. So the only issue we're dealing with is the bay sizing. And the question is, can we do anything about that relative to using the kind of information we have currently on the, I guess, second scenario, and talk about the bay sizing and figuring out, is there a way how would you recommend going forward on that? Getting community outreach and determining and then redesigning?
Travis, normally the way that we've done it is we've gotten a list of equipment from the department that's determined to be necessary and critical to their operations, and we size the bays to accommodate the equipment. And everyone is different. Everyone's different. Frontline, whether you can stack the apparatus for a primary response or secondary response, every department is different. The way that they organize it and the way they respond to a fire in Carlisle is no different. So we would start with the equipment list, how the equipment rolls out in the event of a call, and then we'll build it based on the needs of the equipment and the size of the equipment that we have and we're dealing with.
But that determination has to come from us.
It does, in my opinion. and I know
And we
that's-
haven't had that conversation, yeah, or that
Okay.
working
Kind of at the
discussion.
core of it.
Or that education, we haven't had the.
Kind of at the core of what
Right.
the feedback, and I'm no expert, so, you know, I'm trying to filter all this out myself, but, you know, the main points of feedback I've heard and questions are, I do think, as you said, everyone agrees health and safety, recruitment, and then the question comes around some of this apparatus, what do we need versus, you know, what do we have, and
And how much has to be stored.
yeah, and then I look at it a step further of, you know, we have a DPW that needs a lot of investment, and so, you know, if this is gonna be 15 million, and that's like, what as a town can we afford, and how do we manage
Well, there's
multiple
right,
projects?
so there's, you know, like everybody in this room, I think, and most people in town, we highly value our on-call department.
Yeah,
We love it, but, and I've been struggling with this for 20-something years here. What is the tipping point at which we really have to confront regionalized services? Now, we went through that years ago in police. We didn't reach a consensus. But there may be a time, you know, where that's a thing. And dispatch has been discussed, and fire. Now, we don't want to go into that now because that would be giving up our on-call department. But if we're looking at a $20 million investment to meet the needs, we do have to ask ourselves, you know, do we just say, when that time comes, we need to think in terms of a satellite station and not a self-contained station? Maybe we do have to do that, you know, to design for, I say this because I'm not a volunteer, and I don't want to, you know, I mean, I volunteer, but our volunteer time is nothing compared to what they do. So I'm very conscious of that. I don't want to be, you know, dictating. But is the 20, 30-year time horizon with an on-call in mind really a reachable goal? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's, let's satisfy what we need, and let's have a lens of, if that's not sufficient, what does it look like when it's a satellite to a larger department?
well, and to, you know, to the point earlier made is, we certainly don't want to design, if this project goes forward as constructed, which I think it will be eventually, we don't want to design ourselves into a corner.
Yeah.
And so I think that's just part of the follow-on with Tecton, and in the refinement of any concept is, what happens if in 10 years we become a satellite station? What works, what doesn't work? How should we build that flexibility in? I have no idea what the difference is, but I think that's another piece that we would want to look at that we didn't cover in our initial conceptual overview. And that's something we need to, when we present this to the town, we need to be able to answer these questions, answer the concerns being raised by the community, have good answers, vetted answers to justify whatever investment we're asking, because we are going to be asking for a large investment. We are asking for large investments for police, and we just owe it. And this community is, they're smart people, they pay attention, and they demand those answers. So that's all that back to the original question of, how do we get answers to those questions so we can keep this project moving forward?
Thank you, Scott.
What do we need to do at town meeting? Do we need to ask for more money? How much more money should we ask for, given the work that still needs to happen? And how does that impact, you know, I'm putting on my old FinCom hat. I don't like adding numbers at the very end of the process, because that messes everything up to some extent, but, you know, where are we at with that? We were talking about the 125, right?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
I don't know.
Well, are you, but I think partly it depends on which of these.
So I think the big question is, do you want, I think it sounds so simple, town meeting is in 12 days. Are you prepared to do the math tonight to get the number you need and be done with it? Or do you want us to bring you a number on the 13th
Next
week
Tuesday.
that you can discuss? And the downside of that is you only have 5 days before town meeting.
What, Neil, from your, it's a great question. And you're listening to all this, like, how long would it take you to turn around what you need to scope the next 5 months.
I don't think my number changes.
Okay, you're done.
Personally.
And how long would you think it would take Tecton to react to this and sharpen, come back and say either 25 is good enough or we really need?
I think you just need to clearly ask them for what you expect from them for the next 5 months, and they can turn it around fairly quickly.
Okay, so I'm good, I would be good with, are we meeting
But-
next week? Is that?
We have a regular meeting, but don't we have to decide whether we want Tecton to come to do enough work and have the other investigations done that we're getting a 60% schematic design for the fall town meeting, or less than that?
So
Right? Or 100%, which is,
terms-wise, a conceptual design is a nice drawing, a well-informed drawing.
Mhm.
A schematic design is more robust, so it's
Right.
actually digging into the building. And so, based on this conversation, I don't think we get to a schematic design by the fall.
by the fall, okay.
So really, it's, do you want to add the site investigations? And how much will Tecton require to do a fully vetted conceptual design, a cost estimate, and outreach? Which I think
Okay.
we're most of the way there.
Mhm.
And again, looking forward, if we are successful in that, we could get money approved to do the schematic design for spring town meeting.
After the
fall.
fall. At the fall town, this fall town meeting, we would be asking for,
If we're successful in
Funding
the
for
next
the
5
full-
months,
yeah.
in the fall, we'd say, we need X number of dollars, we have the concept, now we need the schematic so we can come back to you in the spring with a refined number to say, that to get approved. Would that be the ultimate plan?
That would be the ask in the fall.
Yeah.
How much more design do you want to do?
Right, so we don't need a schematic, or more schematic for the fall, in my opinion. We need to be able to get everything on the same page so we could stand up there and defend a concept and ask for more money to get the schematic, if that makes sense.
and the schematic would also, we would also be trying to get actual bids before spring of
No.
'26 town meeting?
No.
No, okay,
So you have to do the
Not
schematic
with a
design,
schematic.
then you
Right.
take the schematic design and you build construction documents.
I'm sorry,
And then
and so
bid.
those construction documents we would have for that spring '26 town meeting?
That's not what.
No,
Scott
yeah,
said.
so
No, so you're,
how do we get to a project that could be approved in the spring, a year from now?
So
right, because that's what we were
this
talking
goes
about.
back to my original
Yeah,
comment too. So if you just go conceptual to the fall, you're going to be in the same sprint you are now for the spring.
yeah, see, that's why I think we,
The idea of adding more design money was so that you can do more pre-design,
Mhm.
so that the
mhm,
fall to spring goes smoother.
Yep.
yeah, not to rush.
But that's not, if you don't have a congealed idea too, right, then it's hard to design it. So
So if we wanted to have Tecton get further, closer to a schematic design by the fall, how much additional, maybe the question to them is, how much additional money would they,
let me try this.
Okay.
Can you get one solid idea for this fire station by October? That's a
Meaning-
question. Can the board, will you be able to do that?
And that
Because if
gives
you
enough-
can't, then you don't need a schematic design yet.
yeah,
And the October it would take a month to do the schematic?
No, you have to have the number for the fall by October
Right.
in some type of presentation.
You need the schematic for the number, right? Or you need it if you want a fidelity number.
Can this group come up with a concept? Yeah. I don't think we have a choice.
An agreed upon vetted
Yes.
community outreach.
I think we have to commit to that. If we don't commit to that, then what do we?
right.
Right, we're not moving anywhere.
Yes, it has to be a top priority. Now, I just don't know what that is, what's the ask in the fall then? Say we come up, we do this, we come up with a concept picture and a scope that everyone is in agreement about, has been vetted, we've addressed concerns, answered concerns. It's concept this, we think it's gonna be this, fall town meeting. What are we asking for? Are we asking for $15 million at fall town meeting, or are we asking for,
The rest of the design
The
money.
design money to get everything to go to bid.
for spring? And is that enough time?
I believe so, but that, I would like to confer with my colleagues at Tecton and ask them. it's really their labor, not mine.
The reason you're seeing us hesitate,
Yeah, no,
I can speak for my
No.
friend Neil, which I would never do, but I'm about to. If you said, we agree on this design, just go do it, and there was no iteration, then yes. But if it comes back, or there's a building committee that wants to continue to vet at 25,
Yeah.
60, and 100%, then it really does slow it down. So to ask you to commit to that now is very difficult.
yeah.
So I don't think it is likely, given the way that the town goes through projects, that you could sprint from November to May and get that done. So you'd really be looking at the next fall, which greatly increases your costs. Which is why I was suggesting to try and get to schematic design, but this conversation tonight indicates that it's probably gonna take all summer to get to conceptual design, which is the first step.
I think that's probably true. I mean, just given the summer and everything else.
Summer's a tough time to get people to do things, and especially if we're not, I mean, I do think we still need to personally drive the process, but if we're not going to be the committee, or only part of us will be the
Well,
committee.
we have to figure that out.
Asking people to spend time in the summer, it is gonna take a while.
'Cause this-
Well, I'm going to offer a little, I don't know, here's my take on the community input. If we said, after May 18th, we have a plan that we have worked out with CMS and Tecton about what meetings are happening, with whom, and we want them to happen before, July 4th, which is, a month and a half, basically, after town meeting. If we put our nose to the grindstone, I think we can make that happen, particularly if we use the monthly meetings of existing boards and committees as one vehicle for getting input. And then I think we've got to schedule a couple of community meetings and we try to do it before school ends, right? Because we know what happens here once school gets out. And that, if we can, get into gear to do that, that's when I think we get, and I guess I don't know if it's Tecton or CMS but we get the summary findings from that outreach. As soon as the outreach ends, I mean, I don't know how long it takes to put that together, but we get the summary of what the outreach showed with real specifics about, these were the top 2 priorities and whatever else. And then that's what then we, as a select board, I think, that's when we have to decide, which would be in July, what sort of, I don't know what the right word is, design, I guess, right? What elements are we changing at all what the goals are, or can we make them more specific? And then we want to turn it over to Tecton to do as much as they possibly can.
But then they have to come back with,
Half of July and August and
Adjust.
early September.
but then we're only then at the agreement of a concept.
Well, I don't know I don't know
Then you
how
have
the
to- you have to do a
process
schematic.
works if we can can you do that faster? I mean, you know, obviously I don't know
schematic
what
must
I'm
take
talking about.
some time.
But once you had the community input, if you have that by the end of June, what could be done in terms of getting closer to a schematic design by the fall? What do you think is possible?
I think that if the vision was congealed and there was a clear direction on which to go, we could easily produce a schematic design for fall town meeting. I think that's attainable.
When would you have to have the congealed design done?
Well,
Shield.
I know, isn't that funny?
Again, it's more, I'm not encouraged, based on the discussion tonight,
Yeah,
that it is attainable, which is why if you guys are comfortable to get to a conceptual in the fall, that's where we'll be. And I'm not trying to pressure the process, I'm not trying to force the process.
Mhm.
And we've seen how well the first 8 weeks went, or 10 weeks, or whatever it was. it just led to more question and more speculation. So clearly, that's not the right way to continue forward, frankly. I think we
Right.
need to
Right.
just let the process take its time, and we'll bring a concept in the fall.
But, and do you think that, would you agree that, as Ryan was saying, he doesn't think we can get a schematic and cost estimate in time for spring of '26 town meeting to ask for what we need to actually get the construction documents, if I'm using the right terms? Is that was what I thought I heard you say, right?
Everything's gotta go
So
right.
I'd like,
Right.
but I'd like to know what you think on that, because I am conscious that,
We
you know, if we
normally,
wait 6 months and it just increases the cost that much.
I would say
more.
that it's fairly common that a design from schematic design through construction documents for a job of this size would roughly take 9 months from start to finish.
Okay.
So, do I think that if we went to schematic design level in the fall, that we could get to a finished set of construction documents in the spring? It would be close, but I think we could get there. But it would just require a lot of commitment and a lot of not second guessing that has not
What,
demonstrated itself
demonstrated
thus far.
what's the ROM cost of that? Like, we gotta figure out how much money we're gonna ask for, like, in 2 weeks, right? So that's some $100,000-ish. But then, this piece, that piece, what would that,
I think I told you before, Dave, the order of magnitude for design costs is roughly 10%.
okay, 10%?
Of the
Okay, good. So
construction
a couple
cost.
million bucks.
So if it's a $14 million
Yeah,
job,
yeah,
you're looking
sorry.
at roughly 1.2 to
All
1.4
right, and that would be the fall
million.
ask.
That would be the fall
And it would be
ask.
around a conceptual drawing, okay, I mean, and then, so the race to get back on Ryan's preferred timeline would be, that would be the race, to try to get the CDs in the spring, and that's a hard cost that would be asked.
That was your timeline that I was pushing you to do, not my timeline.
So back to the spring of 2025, it does seem to me that the point you made makes sense about at least site work, including
Yeah.
site work in the scope,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so we agree.
So I think we're at the $124,000 number, right? An extra 25 plus a 62.
And, yep,
Yeah.
and that includes
Whatever it
some of
was.
the, like, the wetland flagging, the
Yes.
site
All
survey.
these
And
things
I know
that's
that-
never sunk,
Yeah.
that, you know, that would never be a sunk cost. I mean, unless you never did anything.
Right, and,
And that would save time later when you're,
right,
so,
I think it's appropriate too,
yeah, I think
because
it's
of that.
appropriate, I agree.
Okay, so I think that kind of is our direction forward. Is that,
Yeah.
everyone on board with that? Ryan, are you, not on board, are you, did you follow all that from
We
a?
want to get the site,
You
we
want-
want enough money to have the site investigations done, this full list, and enough money to have Tecton. The question is, are they producing, we going with a conceptual design by fall town meeting, or trying to push it to get a schematic? And I'm hearing folks say, it's, given how we're operating now, it's unlikely we can get to a schematic.
It's the
So we should
summer.
just accept that we're gonna slow down and not get to a final.
Well, I think I was peeking over his shoulder. I think the schematic, adding that work would be like another couple $100,000. So now we're looking to ask for $300,000 in a warrant article at the last minute at town meeting?
No, I thought we weren't gonna do.
No, he's
I'm
saying that
saying
rhetorically.
hypothetically, if we
Right.
did
This
add that.
time he was rhetorical.
I was talking just from a
Yes.
cost standpoint. I think
Right.
that's too much to
Right.
try to add
In the
in.
very short,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean.
I think baby steps.
okay.
So if I can take a swing, the original conversation. So, option one included adding 25,000 for outreach to the existing contract. It's 62,000 for site investigation and 37.5 for the OPM, which is 124,000. I also heard David say that he would like a more robust conceptual design, which may add cost.
No, I didn't mean more robust. I meant a more robust community outreach process that would get us to a design that had the imprint of community. So I was saying, It's not design, cost, community outreach. It's community outreach, design, cost, community outreach. So that may be a scope creep for Tecton from their 25K.
So add another 25K.
So that's what I was
Make
gonna
it
say.
Maybe you add another
150.
25K, just, but you should ask them that,
Keep
and
it
they
in
ought
your
to be able to
pocket.
turn that around in the week between now and the 13th, is that what they read?
As friendly as I can, I would like to tell them that 150 is what we've got, and that's what we want.
Okay.
So I think as a board, are we settled on that as 150,000
Yeah.
and that process that we just?
The 150 is 50 for them, whatever Neil asked
50
for,
and
and site work? What is the
Yes.
150? Is that what it is?
62 for site work, 37.5 for the OPM, and the remainder for design.
Sure, that sounds great to me.
I would like to ask, and you tell me if it's reasonable or not, I would like to see at least the outline of a community outreach plan. And if that's, normally, I don't know if you generate that or Tecton does, but I would like that presented to us next Tuesday, if at all possible, because I think it would be very helpful when we get at questions at town meeting, to be able to say, and here's what's gonna happen over the next period of time.
Okay,
That's possible?
we'll do the best we can.
Okay,
All right. I wanted to kind of wrap up with the fire department here,
Yeah.
because we have some other things to do.
yes.
Thank
yeah.
you.
So,
Thanks to everybody.
thank you
Thank
for
you.
staying so late. This
Thank
was
you.
helpful, though. I think we had to go through this
My
process.
pleasure.
So we're on B, huh?
Well, we're on C,
Agenda.
actually.
Just finished B, now we're on C.
We're on C, come on. All right.
And some people have been waiting very patiently, so.
Oh, I know.
Maybe we should jump to those topics that they're here, and interested in.
Let's see.
Was there one that you were referring to, Barney?
Well, I think we should ask, is everybody here that's non-staff, are you here to talk about the MBTA citizens petition?
That-
Okay.
that's C,
And is
so that's
anybody
the
else? Yeah, no, but I just wondered if, and so no one else is here to talk about a different topic? Okay, and nor online,
All right.
I guess,
All
okay.
right. So we'll talk about the MBTA Communities Citizen Petition. So, yes.
There are two items that you haven't made recommendations on now. So one of them is the citizens petition, and the other one is the ADU bylaw.
Right.
So those are not required tonight, but should be the main focus.
Great.
Okay,
So we'll start with the MBTA Communities Citizens Petition. I'm looking for community input, so if you wanted to come forward and introduce
Travis,
yourself.
yeah,
Oh,
sorry,
hold
go
on,
ahead.
go ahead.
No, I just wanted to clarify something. So Ryan's saying we haven't taken a position on the citizens petition. Is it that we're deciding whether or not we support the concept in the petition of asking the planning board to provide more than one option when they bring an MBTA plan to the fall? Is that what we would be taking a position on?
It's to read exactly what that says in the petition of the article, and we will take a position on that.
Whether
It's
we
not
su-
anything
okay.
else than what
Yep.
is written right
Okay.
there.
All right, great. That's helpful. Okay,
Okay.
got it.
Thank you, Travis. I'm Ken Mostello, 30 Kimball Road. Just to, before I say anything, let me just say I'm speaking as a private citizen, not as a representative of the Board of Assessors. Okay? So I want to talk about this warrant article briefly and explain what it's about and why we submitted it. So the Citizens Warrant Article 25 asks for the following, really, of the Planning Board. We're asking for one or more options on the MBTA law, in addition to the so-called multifamily conservation cluster plan that includes one that rezones for minimal acreage. We're also asking for regular and sustained community input and education leading up to the fall vote on the proposed plans. Now, let me be clear about what this is not, okay? It's in no way intended to be a rebuke of the planning board, okay? Instead, it's intended to be an affirmation of a process that hopefully benefits from the mistakes other communities have made and gets Carlisle an approved plan in November. It's also non-binding. Personally, I believe the article, by its mere presence on the town meeting agenda, is already having a positive impact. We had a substantial dialogue with the planning board on April 28th. That came later than we would have liked, but it did happen. They also are exploring other plans. I'll commend that effort regardless of whether the planning board agrees with the article or chooses to endorse it. In the spirit of cooperation, we did seek their endorsement. That said, I care more about their actions than picking up an endorsement on the article. The warrant article is just a means to lead us to a more favorable end in the fall. The Carlisle Alliance for Preservation, it's the group that sponsored the article, is concerned about the impact the MBTA law will have on health and safety, town finances, and the preservation of the community we all call home. I will point out that we feel validated by a recent vote of the Board of Health, which reiterated the health and safety concerns we voiced with the Planning Board's original proposal. The Planning Board should be equally concerned. They live here too, and they drink the same water we do. In defense of the Planning Board, let me say they've been handed a difficult and maybe impossible job to do. In a semi-rural community devoid of public water and sewer, there can be no perfect plan for dense development, nor are we expecting one. This is a planning board that previously held 1 to 2 hour meetings on occasion to review and approve development proposals. Then they got handed the MBTA Communities Act, a law that has embroiled them in some political controversy. They did not ask for this, and it has created unprecedented polarization throughout the 177 eastern Massachusetts communities that are affected. And now this board of volunteers is lucky to finish their weekly meetings by 11 p.m., and each time they fill the room with agitated public. I've served in town government for 16 years, most of them as a board chair, and I'm no stranger to some controversy either. That may be why I'm more sympathetic to their ordeal than they understand. Like them, I had no perfect plan to offer either, nor did I invite controversy. What I can tell you through the lessons I've learned is that there is really no substitute for community engagement. You need to engage and listen to the people who don't necessarily agree with you. If you look around at the mistakes that have been made by other communities in devising an MBTA plan, they all point to a lack of public discourse during the formation process. And I am speaking about Lexington, Bedford, and Needham, just to name a few. In March, for example, a Lexington special town meeting rescinded much of their MBTA rezoning by an astounding 94% landslide vote. I do not want to see that happen here. I want Carlisle to get it right the first time. We cannot afford to wait until November to educate our public on a law that is so complex, even those who work with it every day don't fully understand all its nuances. Nor can we wait to hear the public's questions or objections. Our process will be better to have sustained public engagement now, rather than expecting we'll somehow get through it all in a few hours at a fall town meeting. That won't happen. That's why we need this warrant article. You would be supporting a request for options, education, and sustained public discourse, and nothing more. Thank you. Any questions?
In terms of your interactions with the planning board, have they responded to this request or indicated what they plan to do at the town meeting in terms of how they, at a broad level, in terms of if they do intend to present one option or if they do intend to present multiple options?
I have had discussions both at planning board meetings and one-on-one with their committee chair, and she tells me they are intending to present more than one option. We like to think we've had some influence in kind of getting them to think about that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the immediate audience here who wants to speak on behalf of anything about the MBTA warrant article? Is there anyone online who wants to make a comment or a question? about the MBTA Community Citizen Petition? Okay. Well, we have to decide if we're going to take a position on this or not.
I have an opinion on this.
Good.
And I say this from so my inclination is that we do not take a position on the citizens petition. Not to say we don't individually make a decision on whether or not we want to support it as private citizens, but I think as a select board, if we want to give feedback and direction to the planning board, we should do that as a select board with a memo or a statement or our own vote, versus taking a position on a citizen's petition, which I believe is brought by the residents, for the residents. So I support the cause and the very fact that there is a citizen's petition, but I think as a select board, I think it's more appropriate we not take a position on this, and instead, if we want to direct the planning board, we do that as a select board to them directly.
Okay. Rather than get crickets from me, I actually think that's a good suggestion. I mean, I have worked, openly to encourage with the citizens petition people to speak on behalf of it. I've worked in, private and one-on-one conversations with people to try and bridge, the planning board and those different interests. But, as an elected official here on the select board, and I kind of like that approach. I think that not taking a position on this is appropriate in this case. And I actually do think, what Ken said, they have had an influence here, just in the mere fact of doing it. And if the town, wants to move this forward and, in its collective wisdom, that's great. Or if it doesn't, that's, I think, the town people will decide. And I don't think we have to particularly weigh in on this.
Agree.
You agree?
Absolutely. So I move the select board take no position on Article 25.
Second.
Okay.
One thing I just encourage then us as a select board, following up on Scott's comment, is that we have some kind of, I'd like to know what the planning board is planning to say. Are they going to say anything at town meeting regarding this article?
Regarding the citizens petition.
Yeah, because, right, and then that's, because if they're opposing it, then that sends a real signal about how they're thinking about what they want to present in the fall. And
Have they taken a position, to your knowledge? Have any other Board of Health, have any boards or committees taken an official position?
I don't think any have as
Yeah.
of right now, Scott. Now, we have asked the planning board for endorsement of the article. I don't think they're real keen on endorsing it, but they haven't really given us any
Right.
reasons. I mean, it's a pretty simple ask, right?
Right.
Have multiple options and talk to the town.
Yeah.
And it's not binding.
That's about
No,
it.
right.
Right.
It's not binding,
Uh,
right, it's an advisory, yeah.
Right, and it is non-binding.
Right.
They
Right.
could choose to ignore it if they so desired. And what they have told me is they essentially are planning on doing what we are asking, but they don't want to endorse the warrant article.
Well, yeah, I think that's,
That's
we don't have many citizens petitions, so it's a unique type of warrant article, especially given that it's non-binding. And I think you've, in many ways, as you said, achieved a lot. There's, there's still some time before a town meeting in the fall, but to this point, you've achieved your goals in terms of, at least what I've seen, a lot of options being considered. And I would expect as a resident that as we get past this town meeting and as we start focusing on the next town meeting, that, as a citizen, I want to see options. I want to understand, I don't need to see all the options, but I want to understand what the different options are. And I think it's important, it's a very important issue, and the town needs to, there needs to be, just as we're talking about community
Right.
feedback for the fire
Right.
station, I would expect the planning board should be soliciting similar community feedback on the various different approaches. And I think that's something.
Which they are trying to do, right?
And I think we should just keep an eye on that, and if we feel like something is not being done, we should communicate that to the planning
I
board.
mean, to be fair, I realize, and Ken, and, you know, this has gone on a while, and there was some, you know, remarks, let's say, about they were homing in on one option. But if you went to those information sessions, they presented a lot of stuff, a really lot of well-researched stuff. I went to one of them, and almost, I would say, too much information, because it may have galvanized people who were neutral on this topic, but I don't think you can accuse them of not reaching out and trying to, you know, promote discussion of the issue.
But
Hold on, we have some more public comment. Go ahead. Introduce yourself.
Cindy Kraft, 75 Patch Meadow Lane. I attended those sessions,
Yeah.
and they had a specific plan that they were promoting. There were not multiple plans. Multiple plans came about as a
Okay.
response
Okay.
to angry residents.
Okay.
And I guess my concern here, I don't actually care who endorses or doesn't endorse. My concern is that information is not necessarily getting out. The Board of
Yeah.
Health came out and supported, based on a vote, the smallest option. That didn't appear in the mosquito. I don't know if you guys know it. I don't know to what degree boards listen to each other, but there's concern that, you know, they're still on their own track.
I'd like to add to that.
Yeah.
I do feel we've come a long way since those fall sessions. I agree with Cindy. The agenda in those fall sessions was to sell the community on the multi-family cluster plan. And just to underscore the point, they took surveys going in and leaving on really two questions. How do you feel about the law, and how do you feel about this plan? And they didn't ask about other plans or, you know, other ideas in those sessions. And the results were overwhelmingly negative, especially on the plan, about 80%. So again, we've come a long way. It's gotten better. I like to think we've all, you know, collectively as a community, we've had some good input into that, and that's helped to shape what is happening. But yeah, I'm encouraged that they are going the right way.
Well, and ultimately, it's up to the town whether they
Right.
approve whatever plan or plans are presented. So
Absolutely.
my advice is do your work.
Yeah.
If you really want to, if you need the community support, you have to listen to the community. And so,
And Scott, understand, we want a plan.
oh yeah, and I appreciate that in listening to the comments at the last planning board meeting, and watching the video, the YouTube video, being very clear that your goal is not to not pass something. You want a solution. You just want to see the options, as opposed to some communities where people are saying, we don't know,
You shouldn't comply.
we will not comply. So I do appreciate that, and that did come across clearly in your communications.
To be clear, though, there are still gradients of compliance.
Yeah.
And so that's something that the planning board is wrestling with now, in part due to the community support that you're seeing, you know, in this group or others, or people have spoken of that relative to perhaps they zone over an area that, you know, would be harder to develop. And so that has to be factored in, and there's all this stuff. But I think it's actually played out, as messy as it is, it's like, this is pretty good in that, you know, the planning board had a direction. They felt that that was the right direction. They did community outreach, and then they pulled it back and they said, you know what, we're taking it from the committee, the subcommittee, and we're gonna reevaluate, and now they're coming up with multiple plans. It's because of
Sounds familiar.
citizens. Okay.
Carlisle
I just want to add one other thing in terms of precedent. I cannot remember the select board ever taking a position on a citizen's petition.
Okay.
Okay.
I do want to ask one question of the group, and maybe you can't speak on behalf of the group, you know, because you're not all here, but the language of the actual article says that you are, want your advice, you'd like the town to pass something that advises the planning board to include at least one article that satisfies the town's obligation to comply with the MBTA communities legislation. But you start with two alternatives. So I just want to, I don't know, again, if you can say, do you support two options, but that both of them comply with the MBTA Act, even if there's some questions within that, but because one could read this that you're okay if one of the options doesn't comply with the MBTA Act. I mean, just the way this is written, you know, so, yeah.
No, we want compliant options.
Okay.
And there is a process to get.
Yeah, that's fine. I
preliminary
don't need to
compliance.
know anything
We're not
more.
looking
Okay,
to,
good.
not comply.
Great. All right, so there was a motion, a second.
Yep.
We're going to have a vote to not take a
Take a
statement
position.
position on this. So we'll do a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. Okay.
Thank you for
Yeah.
your
Stand
continued
around.
time and efforts.
Okay, thank you.
Next to the accessory dwelling unit bylaw.
Thank you.
We don't need to cover the MBTA request for the planning board for more
The
money?
25 consultant.
You already recommended.
Or in support of that,
All right,
yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
All right, thank you all.
Mark's still here,
Once
making me
again, Mark gets
nervous.
the bitter end award.
Yes,
And these fine folks.
yes, all these other people.
Leave? No,
Something that you cannot support.
no.
No.
But now we're on the
But we're on the
ADU, right?
ADU. So, Brian, what is our question here?
Do we take a position?
So whether or not you're going to take a position and if you're ready to take a position. So you have up until the vote at town meeting.
All right. And the proposed bylaw, I just pulled it up here.
So we're hoping to print the motions book right after your meeting next week. So if you want it in the motions book,
It would have probably been helpful to have a short presentation from the planning board on this, because it's been kind of a moving target,
She's given, hasn't she pretty much given that?
not on the
No,
latest
and
one.
it has, you're right, it has been a moving target. They've changed
Yes,
provisions in the last meeting.
I don't have the same attention
Right, so,
span that I've had in the past, so I've lost track of where we're at with it, to tell you the truth, so.
Is the video that's online that you and Julie did, is that current?
yes.
Yeah. the
Because
videos and
you should watch
materials.
that, it's very helpful.
Okay.
And I think that's quite clear in describing what this is all about.
Well, I know about the state ADU, so it's a matter of adopting the state ADU with my understanding, law with a site plan approval process, so they have some controls over thing, and they've decoupled it now from the 1,200 square foot accessory apartment.
Well, not only that, but if I heard it correctly, Ryan, that the by right law that the state passed is for the size of an ADU is
900.
900,
versus 12.
and the 1,200 that we
We used to
used
have.
to allow, that's going to be eliminated.
Altogether.
Yes, right? Am I understanding the video correctly? That's eliminated. So 900 is the
Oh.
max size for
Because
an
they changed
ADU.
from how it used to be.
I
When they
know.
were originally doing it, they were going to have both. and
They
they-
were going to do both, because
Right.
we've always,
Right.
accepted 1,200 square foot ones.
Right.
And I thought, and it was a different process, it's a special permit.
Right.
And so they've eliminated that altogether. You can't even get a special permit for that now.
And the other thing is that they are allowed to put some conditions on a special, on the by right ADU, but not, I guess the language is not unreasonable conditions.
Right, well,
Something like
because
that.
that part I understood, because I
Yeah.
understand the state part. Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
Was there anything else that Julie had pointed out in that video? I just watched it recently, but I don't remember. I thought, she did a great job, but it's fairly long. And so were there any other specific changes that she had highlighted besides?
Not that I can remember
Yeah, okay.
on the
Okay.
fly here.
Because I believe it, doesn't it also eliminate the, what did we used to call the other version?
The affordable accessory apartments.
Yes.
Well, that's been eliminated a long time ago.
Okay, well, there was, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I thought okay, so they've eliminated those as well, okay.
Is there anyone online who has a question or wanted to provide more information on this, the accessory dwelling unit bylaw?
Okay.
Hi, I'm Christina Christopoulos, Hemlock Hill. I've actually been attending all the planning board meetings, and I believe the reason they eliminated the 1,200 square foot
Special permit.
option, yeah, special permit option, is because the state did not allow an either-or approach.
Ah,
And so if they kept the 1,200 square foot by special permit option, those properties would still be eligible for a protected ADU, an additional ADU up to 900 square feet.
oh,
And so since the state did not allow an either-or, they just eliminated the 1,200 square foot option.
all right, okay,
Oh.
great. That's sort of
Gold star.
unfortunate, but there you go.
That's a good
Yes.
answer.
Yes. Right.
What did she say?
Well, if you had a 1,200 square foot accessory apartment by special permit, you could also then have a
Oh, I see.
900 square
You
foot
double, yeah.
You could do
ADU
three
and double up.
different places.
I got you.
Yes.
They did talk about having a person required to live in the unit or on the
Yeah.
property or something, so.
Yeah,
Got it.
well, actually,
Because they were concerned about condominiumizing and different.
yeah, okay.
Um,
All right, so that makes a lot of sense.
Can I ask, Ryan, has there been any pushback on the ADU bylaw from any particular board or committee or members of the public?
Well, it's another one of those state
Not that I know of,
mandated
but that's not an informed,
No, yeah, I'm,
Has the zoning board weighed in on it?
not that I know of.
things. I mean, the ZBA?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause this
They're
is a
not going to
change
be
of a-
determining.
Yeah, but
the-
they're
the
not
power
gonna
was
be
taken
involved.
away from them.
Yeah.
So they're not a board that would decide if it was allowed or not. They
Right.
would.
Okay, it's
There's no
all gonna
zoning
fall
considerations.
It goes
It's-
to a site plan review, I
With
believe.
the
and
planning
then
board.
With the planning board.
And they don't have a role now. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Now, well, I don't know. That might be a question to follow up with Julie. Because maybe if there was a setback requirement that they needed a variance to do or something on a new structure, that would be something that might go to the ZBA. But I don't remember if that falls now to the planning board because of if they're applying for this particular, ADU permit, then it
Uh-huh.
kicks over to the planning board.
Yeah, I don't think it,
I think they kind of.
It's
I've
listed
been on
as
the
a zoning
ZBA
bylaw,
for
you know.
years, or was,
Yeah.
and the power keeps being taken away over and over, and it was fine, I understood
yeah,
it.
okay. So the question on the table is, do we support
support it.
this or not? And I guess I can't see any reason not to support it.
I would actually say, do we have to do this because we have to get it in the motion book if we don't do it tonight?
No, we said he was gonna wait till next Tuesday.
Because I'd like to
after next
wait-
Tuesday night's meeting.
Yeah, because I'd like to hear, maybe, is there anything from Julie that we need to hear or not? Additional information?
Maybe we
I
should
don't
watch
think
the
so.
video together at the end of this meeting.
I watched the video, and I mean,
I thought it was,
I just don't know if there's any ramifications that I'm not aware of that we
Right.
should know about, but it seems fairly
It's
straightforward.
a state mandate.
Yeah.
These are.
Trying to be compliant.
They're compliant, and what it does is it gives them, more control because they're submitting it to the, that site plan,
to the planning board.
planning board, yeah.
Right.
Otherwise, people
Approve it.
could just build anything and not.
It's a,
Right.
yeah,
you
so.
know, And,
And it also gives more, that's the other thing she said, it gives more, the building commissioner, instead of having to make his own judgment.
Right.
This would provide more
public, transparent process
Yeah.
Yes.
More
around
detail
it. So
about, yeah.
it seems like it's everything I know about it, I would support it. I just don't know if there's anything I don't know about it.
Right.
Just be glad that planning board now has site plan approval authority, because when I was on planning board, select board was doing site
Oh,
plan
jeez.
approval.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Boy.
Yeah. Okay, so, given that, do you want to hold off, or you?
Well,
There we
do people want to hear more information? I don't really want to bring her in
Okay.
here if she doesn't
Okay.
I
need
don't
to.
think we have to
Good.
beat her to death.
All right, so if there's a motion,
Not on this one.
I move that we support the ADU bylaw number, whatever number it is.
Article 26.
Article 26.
Second.
Okay.
all right, any further discussion? David, did you want to weigh in? No?
I'm happy.
Okay, voice vote, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. All right, you supported that. Town administrator bylaw,
I support that.
I think we already did support it.
Yes.
It's on here for public participation.
Comment,
Oh. Yeah,
All
well,
right. Well, is there anyone who would like to make a comment?
okay.
Anyone online?
It's unfortunate that there's nobody here for us to, once again, have an opportunity to review, because we kind of went back and forth on this one as well. It had several iterations, which we did, take and present to various boards and committees, and then changed it at the end.
Right.
And then changed it again, and then changed it
Well,
a third time, but,
Yeah, but wait a minute. We went to boards and committees specifically to get input with the understanding that we might change it as a result of that feedback, right?
Right,
So I think,
But remember, at our last
Yeah.
select board
I
meeting.
mean, if there was infinite
we
time, you would do it
decided to
iteratively.
pull-
Right.
But
We decided to exclude Gleason Library as even though our new draft did not have that in it. We decided that at our
no, I know, but
last select board meeting.
if there was infinite time, we would go around to everybody,
one more time.
and then we would go around to everybody.
Yeah,
And
right.
maybe even one more time if there was more.
Right.
But I think we did okay. Like, we went
Oh,
to
I
every,
think we did a
we kind
very
of went
good
to almost
job.
every board.
Right,
And we didn't always
right.
agree with them, but we always listened to them.
Yep,
Right.
So.
yep.
And I've had conversations with individually with various board chairs, discussing it further. RecCom had an initial vote, but it was looking at an older version. And in talking with them, I think they're going to reevaluate or something at an upcoming
take
meeting.
another vote.
That's
Yeah.
mostly what I
Reassume.
want to kind of guard against.
Yes.
That, excuse me, some of the support or non-support will be of the wrong product, so.
Right.
that- Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. But we've done I think our best to reach
think,
out,
yeah,
and
I
we'll
agree.
see, and I'll
And to answer what is the answer, or what do we say to folks that are asking why the library has been excluded?
I appreciate you bringing that up, because I was going to ask that too.
Mhm.
And that has been, one of the questions that's central to people's questioning of what is the logic there? And is there anything, wha-
Well, go.
one of the things that I would suggest is that the school committee is by statute, and in all 351 towns in Massachusetts, the school committee is separate. The libraries have a similar statute that gives them autonomy over their staff and their product, or
Their service.
their
and- yeah.
services. And in evaluating that, when looking at other communities, there are an awful lot that really do separate that out as, a separate entity, a separate facility. And then I guess the facility argument is also out there as well, which is that you have a completely distinct building with, similar to the fire department, and someone could say, well, what about the, DPW? They're not, but the DPW really falls clearly under the town administrator, just in the day-to-day operations and activities, whereas the library is a bit distinct. in having a board
The
of
library
trustees.
also has its own set of policies and procedures, which other entities don't really, I mean, they're real codified policies and procedures. And, well, I'm just thinking about the flagpole. When we did our flagpole policy, it was just for our flagpoles, and it indicated that the library had its own flagpole, and they have control over their policy about
Really? We
that.
did?
Yes.
Okay, good memory.
So I think that's also another differentiating quality of it.
Well, I'm getting off topic, but speaking of flagpoles.
Oh, gosh, I didn't mean to.
That's something that I think a future board here, because we're out of time on, I think, our tenure here, this exact board, but should take up is, because we have right now, a flag, what's the official title, Ryan?
Keeper of the flag.
Keeper of the flag.
Yep.
And the keeper of the flag, is a paid position. But it's an individual, and individuals go on vacation, and individuals do, have their own, and we have a policy, and I think it's going to be wise to actually move that out of the independent realm of a keeper of the flag and into a town role from, however the town administrator thinks it's best to be administered, but maybe it's the DPW or the fire department or something, but to take care of our flag relative to raising and lowering it, because there was I think, miscommunication or something that didn't quite get established correctly when I had asked that it be lowered in respect for the 3 high schoolers who perished, one of whom was from Carlisle. So it went down, up, it had a little mishap, so I think we need to take that up.
When does that require town meeting stuff, or?
No, I think it would be logically fall, because we appoint the keeper of the flag in, right? It doesn't need to go to town meeting. So,
Okay.
All right.
Sorry to get off topic. So that was TA bylaw. Anything else on that separation that the select board and its infinite wisdom?
And I'll just say that the COAHS asked specifically about that, and we had a conversation at the last board meeting, and they were comfortable with my response and voted to support the final version. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, the last one is the budget and capital investment items.
And,
I don't know.
well, and FinCom's budget meeting is coming up,
Thursday.
yeah, 2 nights from now, so.
What do we have to discuss on that one?
It's just here for discussion.
Community input if they wanted to.
If there's anybody, this has been a long meeting, but I think important.
Actually, it's only 20 to 10, but it feels
What do
like
you
a
mean
long
fading?
one.
Yeah, it feels like it's
Only seems like.
Well, it feels like it's been, it should be midnight,
I feel like.
Fire station was about 3 hours, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a couple notes, about the budget. The House Ways and Means put out their version of the budget today.
Yeah.
It indicated $150 for minimum aid for students, which is good for us. We're a minimum aid community, which translates to a state aid change positive in our favor of $47,000 from our original estimate, which brings,
Excellent.
I'm going to add a lot of caveats. So this still has to go to conference committee and is not the final
Yes.
state
Right,
budget. So
right.
we projected off the governor's budget.
Yeah.
The difference between the governor's budget and this budget is $47,000, which would lower the tax impact from 346 to 331. So again, we were conservative.
Yeah.
Hopefully it continues to march down.
Yeah.
Elevator, which has,
Oh, that's a lot.
which lives in the library, there we go, I got there, is the bids come in tomorrow. So we'll have a number for you for your meeting on the 13th to talk about that article. The FinCom will get the first crack at it because they meet on Thursday. And then there is one note in the folder that I need you to decide. So we are borrowing for I believe it's the fire truck, right?
Yeah, it's just the
Well,
motion.
yeah, I didn't
is
understand that
passive.
thing at all.
Yeah.
But I thought,
We have to designate the
How many years?
useful life, the maximum useful life.
Yes. So
Tell us a little more about that.
we're trying to set it up so that we can immediately contract the fire truck, assuming the vote passes at town meeting. So we do need to determine the max life of the fire truck. So you heard tonight that the chief said about 25 years for a fire truck. They hope to extend it longer. All the projections you've seen from me are 15 years for the borrowing costs. So my recommendation to you is I'm not comfortable with anything longer than 20 years, but you can be. So if you want to say 10 years, 15 years.
Because you want to
Is
amortize
this
it
a
faster.
tanker?
no, because,
So I don't want to have a truck we can't use that we're still
Still
borrowing.
paying
for.
Is there no
Right.
standard on
Right,
like
you want
this
to amortize it more
particular
quickly.
vehicle?
yeah, but.
About
we're-
25 years is the usual life.
I'm comfortable with that. Isn't that what we target when we buy these things? We usually say,
So
how old is our
maybe I
current tanker?
misunderstood what Ryan was saying, that when you said you were comfortable with the 10 or 15 years, you were talking about how long the loan was or how long the life the truck was?
So the two are connected. So the select board has to decide if it's longer than 5 years, how long they believe a piece of equipment will last. And this gets sent to the loan officers who then allow us to borrow the money for it.
Okay, but if we have a 25-year, let's say, estimated lifetime, and we only want to bond it for, or borrow for 15, that should not present a problem, right? Okay, so I mean, the longer we think it's going to last, the easier, we could do 10, 15, 20 years.
So the benefit of paying enough early is less interest and you don't run into problems. The benefit of borrowing longer is the lower annual cost that gets put into the operating budget.
Yeah, okay.
How old is the current tanker that it's replacing? How many years of service?
I'd have to look at the video. I think it's 2003. Let me look at the
Okay,
warrant.
so 22, it'll be about 25, but
Yeah.
23, 24.
Okay.
I mean, if we build the fire station, we probably won't be buying any more.
So you gotta remember, we're not getting this one for 3
They're
years.
connected, but they're not connected, because if we said it's only going to last for 10 years, you can't borrow for 20
Right,
years
yeah.
on it then.
Yeah.
Right,
know,
right.
so-
Right.
So-
But it is something that if you got in a fiscal crunch, you might extend it out. We might be amortizing it at 20 years and then say,
2000.
well, we'll extend it to
2000.
30. If we set it at 30 right now.
Right.
And I'm not advocating that. I'm just
25.
saying that's.
I think 25 is a good,
The
25
current one,
years?
he just said went into service in 2000, so it's 25 years old.
The current one, which is the ladder truck that
No,
Chief
the-
Suarez was talking about?
the one
No,
that
no.
this is
This is
replacing.
replacing, okay. Which is,
Or we could
Right.
send a message and
And-
say 50 and tell the.
100.
I don't think the banks will let you do that.
so,
Mark, did you have any thoughts?
I think it's,
You guys talked about it at your meeting one time. Couple,
yeah, I mean,
you didn't in particular, but one of your other
did
members.
FinCom have
it
any?
sounds like it's a choice between a 30-year and a 20-year bond,
20 and 25, I think.
20 or 25, okay.
But you're saying
I
you,
think both are-
we could
I
choose
think it's a
to
flip at that point.
amortize it earlier.
You do the.
Yeah, it gives you
So it
more
doesn't-
options.
right,
So
yeah,
it gives you
so-
more options, so I think go with
25.
25.
All right.
We need a motion?
You need a
so
motion.
here's the motion. I move to approve the maximum useful life of the fire engine to be financed with the proceeds of the $975,000 borrowing authorized by the votes of the town passed May 13th, 2024, Article 14, and May 21st, 2024, Question 1, is hereby determined pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 7,
One.
subsection 1, to be 25 years.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? I was just noting the date, and I was changing the date on it. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. And David was not in the meeting at the moment.
You're gonna
Right.
come, there's a few more of these coming in right after town meeting. so
Great.
Hopefully, if
Do
things.
you want me to
pass.
change it up here too?
Yes, please.
Okay, good.
All right, anything else that anyone wants to discuss?
20, 250.
The letter?
Yeah,
You want it?
are we going to talk about Woodward, or we're going to
We
save?
can, we have 15 minutes that we never have.
Well, it's just
We're all
included in our
together.
packet as if maybe,
Well, but it's not on the agenda, so I'm not
Yeah, I
sure we're
wouldn't
supposed to
go near
talk about
this.
things.
Especially when the, when it's
Pardon?
about
not talk
transparency and
Okay.
everything, we don't.
Okay.
Just because of its,
I thought it's important, though, we'd put all the stuff that we get in the packet
Yeah,
as
that-
public
that's-
comment.
so people
and
know it's,
Regardless of what.
yeah,
I think
okay.
Right.
You submit it to the select board, it goes in there.
Is there anything else about town meeting, logistics, or anything we should cover off on tonight?
David's not here at the moment, but yeah,
Right.
is everything all set for the, did we
Do we have,
do we know that, I've forgotten what the conclusion was around the posters. People that are, we're still doing a post, there's going to be some kind of indoor information with people for each of the articles there with some kind of posted information.
Yeah, he's on the committee.
I'm on the committee with it.
Oh, good.
If you want me to.
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
Please do.
I
Tell
don't
us.
think, I don't think we're forcing anybody to do a poster, but we asked them all. Everybody, we asked each sponsor of one of the articles to provide a poster. I think many of them are. And then there'll be, there's gonna be a food truck. I think, an hour and a half or so before the meeting, something like that, I forget.
It is, yeah.
Huh?
12 o'clock, or 11:30.
Yeah, an hour and a half before, and then the posters, and then the people can bring their food into the cafeteria, and the posters will be around
Set up
the
inside,
side, like we
Okay.
did for the,
like the MBTA
yeah.
input
so they
session.
can eat and walk around and ask
Got it.
questions.
Okay. Sounds good.
David may know, we don't know how many posters we're gonna have.
You know, it's hard to tell. I put out another APB today. And James actually responded, so I think he's gonna do poster.
On the
So
finance.
Julie for sure is gonna have whatever she
oh yeah,
has.
Julie always has.
A couple other people have chimed in to Gretchen. I'm kinda got out of it because Gretchen was taking over and we got a lot to do, so.
Okay.
It's going. I learned just now from Brian that childcare registration is up.
Oh.
So people can sign up. There'll be some publishing of the menu for the truck, so people kind of can
Good.
think about what they can order. They can't pre-order, which I was hoping they could do, but doesn't seem to be possible. You know, I hope the weather's good. I think Aubrey's been doing an awesome job. with
On the
things.
the
So she
social
really-
media, yeah.
She really took that over. So, you know, what we've talked, I think we talked about before, is after the town meeting and as we review it, and we're gonna do some more of it this summer, but we really need to think about a standing committee, kind of like the old home day. We need to have a committee that basically just runs that, you know, process every year. But I think, I'm hopeful that, you know, we'll get some good outcome out of it.
Yeah.
Great.
That's it.
Okay, anything else? Is there anyone in the public left who wants to make a comment or a question?
Last hurrah.
This is it. All right, seeing none. Motion to adjourn?
So
So
moved.
moved.
All right.